Chapter 1429. The power of a god emperor is indeed not something that the immortal realm can compare with. Fang Qingshan recalled the Zhodian star and put on his body. Then he retreated quickly and sighed. One of the reasons he came here was to see the power of a god emperor. His goal was achieved, and at the same time, he understood the gap between him and a god emperor. Previously, because of his breakthrough, he reached the peak of the immortal realm and became an inner disciple of the Tao sect. The pride he had when he became a popular candidate for the first successor disciple was instantly destroyed. This was just an early god emperor, and a half-crippled one at that. If this was a real god emperor, if this was a title among god emperors, if this was a purple title among god emperors, Fang Qingshan dared not imagine. Even if he reached the peak of the immortal realm, if not for the timeless arc, he would only be a little stronger than Jiang, Overlord, and the others. After all, the gap between an immortal and a god emperor was too big. For a moment, Fang Qingshan's mind was filled with thoughts, but the outside world did not stop because of his thoughts. However, the god that the talisman evolved was expressionless. He pinched his hands together and punched. Endless light gathered, and the sky and earth darkened. It was unknown if he absorbed all the light, or if the light covered the sky and earth. Fistwill, the old ancestor of the Kong family, mainly cultivated the fist will, one of the 3,000 Tao wills of the Tao sect. It was on par with the sword will, saber will, spear will, and so on. It was the perfect Tao will for cultivating the Tao of the body, and it was unparalleled in killing. Kill. The god opened his mouth and let out a thunderous roar. Endless light gathered on the tip of the fist. Before it landed, the surrounding space and time had already collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the brilliance was restrained until it entered his body and vanished. It was like a divine object concealing itself, and the fist became simple and unadorned. However, wherever the fist passed, the Buddha's palm that broke through the energy of the stars like a hot knife through butter stopped abruptly. Moreover, it even emitted a series of creaking sounds. The Buddha's light dimmed, and the golden light exploded. The palm lines on the Buddha's palm looked hideous, as if they would burst at any time. Although it was constantly repairing itself, it did not seem to have any effect. This was the power of a third-grade divine emperor. Fang Qingshan's Zhodian star wasn't a big problem to suppress the peak of immortal realm experts. However, when facing the god emperor's power, he wasn't able to resist even one strike. But he wasn't strong enough to resist the god emperor's power. Kacha! After a moment of stalemate, the Buddha's palm was finally shattered by the punch. It was as if it was already extremely fragile and was on the verge of shattering. However, the simple and unadorned fist did not slow down at all. It continued to descend towards the spiritual Buddha in the center of the lotus of bliss without losing any momentum. It seemed as if it wanted to completely shatter the formation and destroy the eye of the formation. Naturally, the formation would collapse on its own. Although the talisman could only be used for one strike, it was refined from the origin of a peak stage divine emperor after all. It would have no problem dealing with ordinary early-stage divine emperors. It could even severely injure a divine emperor if it caught them off guard. Puff! The spiritual Buddha in the lotus of bliss didn't suffer too much damage when the Buddha's palm was broken. As a third-grade spiritual root with lotus attribute, it had a very strong defensive power. This could be seen from the red lotus of hellfire in Fang Qingshan's hand, the green lotus of creation in his mind, and the eternal divine lotus. Therefore, although the Buddha's palm was broken, the golden light of the Buddha's charm only dimmed a little. However, compared to it, the other lotuses and the kind men and women sitting on them were in big trouble. The lotuses that these people sat on weren't real. They were just nodes in the formation. Then, they used the spiritual chi and the charm of the lotus of bliss to transform them into lotus flowers. Now that the eye of the formation was shaken, the nodes naturally fluctuated, and these lotuses became illusory. These people who were enlightened could not only be used to strengthen the formation, but they could also be used as scapegoats. Once the formation nodes, and formation eyes were damaged, the damage would be shared equally with them, thus reducing the damage of the formation. This was also one of the main reasons why the spiritual Buddha and the Lotus of Bliss didn't suffer too much damage. In an instant, the lotuses that these arhats sat on started to turn illusory. Some even collapsed. They opened their mouths like fountains and spat out mouthfuls of blood. Their golden bodies were destroyed. What a huge commotion. What happened? Aren't those disciples only at the immortal realm? Seems like something happened in the crimson heaven realm. Just as Fang Qingshan and the others entered the Divine Emperor's cave abode, the star that he represented didn't stop at all. The speed of his growth was like a rolling snowball. This was because although he entered the cave abode, he left Mosquito Daoran and the others outside. Mosquito Daoran and the others were his clones. Their auras were connected to his. Although his main body wasn't around, the things that he took from them were still counted as his. Therefore, his points were still increasing nonstop. However, even so, he was no longer the only one. Many flowers bloomed, and the others also started to catch up. After all, although Fang Qingshan didn't reject anyone, he couldn't beat the others who had good opportunities and were familiar with the Crimson Heaven realm. For example, people like Kong Chong knew where it was safe and where there were good things. Therefore, he gradually caught up. However, the people in the outside world didn't pay too much attention to this now. At this moment, they were all alarmed by the commotion in the Crimson Heaven realm. The battle between Fang Qingshan, Kong Chong, and the spiritual Buddha was at the level of a divine emperor, especially the talisman in Kong Chang's hand, which contained the source of a peak divine emperor. Although the Crimson Heaven realm isolated the cavern world, it still couldn't stop the leakage. This startled everyone. Although they knew that this batch of Tao Will sect disciples was very good, they expected that even if they were to explode, they would wait until the arena competition. They didn't expect that the power of a divine emperor would explode in such a short time. This was completely out of their expectations. For a moment, the eyes of the divine emperors who were watching the ceremony lit up, as if they wanted to see through the Crimson Heaven realm to see what was going on. This is the aura of a divine emperor. Good heavens, a newborn calf is really not afraid of tiger. However, to be able to fight with a divine emperor, it seems that he's not easy to deal with. Not bad, not bad. I didn't make this trip in vain. I really came. I just don't know who was coming. Everyone was discussing. Some guessed that it was Fang Qingshan, some guessed that it was the top 10 inner disciples, and some guessed that it was a dark horse like Fang Qingshan. There were many different opinions. Only the Kong family knew that it was their generation's pride, Kong Chong. Stinking brat, how dare you? This is just the beginning, and he actually went straight to the Divine Emperor Cavern. I'm so angry. Moreover, he used the old ancestor's talisman. If he doesn't get anything, I'll teach him a lesson when I get back. Chapter 1430. As for the specific situation in the Crimson Cloud Realm, other than the elder technique imparting elder who was in charge of the inner disciple competition, everyone else had no idea. The Kong clan could only judge from the battle of the Divine Emperor and the elder ancestor's aura that Kong Chong must have used the life-saving talisman given to him by the clan. They didn't know that they were only facing a formation and not a real divine emperor. However, they also didn't know that it wasn't just Kong Chong. They also had the variable Fang Qingshan by their side. Their information wasn't accurate. Therefore, they were exasperated. The life-saving talisman was called a life-saving talisman because it was used to protect one's life. It couldn't be used until the last moment. Of course, based on the current situation, it was indeed a critical moment. It was understandable to use it. However, what was the situation now? The inner disciple competition had just begun, and they had just entered the Crimson Cloud Realm. Under normal circumstances, they definitely wouldn't encounter a divine emperor, unless they were greedy and advanced rashly. They wished they could drag Kong Chong out and beat him up for a year. Was the divine emperor's abode that easy to explore? He really didn't know his place. Unfortunately, they didn't have the strength to do so. However, they made a mental note of him. However, no matter what the outsiders thought, it wouldn't affect the Crimson Cloud Realm. At this moment, After the spiritual Buddha's palm was broken, the Kong family's divine emperor's fist continued to land on him. The Buddha's eyes flashed. He seemed to have sensed the danger and activated the entire formation. Million Buddhas paying respects to the sect. The next moment, Buddhist light reappeared and the lotus bloomed. All the arhats and Buddhas seemed to have been injected with adrenaline and were instantly revived. Their eyes shone with dazzling golden light. They bowed towards the Buddha. This bow seemed to have activated the entire formation's power to the extreme. This bow sapped all the energy of the arhats and Buddhas. This bow added the entire formation's power to the eye of the formation. At this moment, the spiritual Buddha seemed to have performed the size, manipulation, and law phenomenon. His entire body more than doubled in size. His entire body emitted an extreme golden Buddhist aura. He stood there with a dignified appearance. Just a glance at him would cause one to involuntarily feel a sense of conversion, as if they would be able to live in eternal bliss. However, there were still some differences from before. The great Buddha from before was the Buddha of compassion, the Buddha of salvation, and the Buddha of ultimate bliss. The current great Buddha was the Buddha of the wisdom king, the Buddha of slaughter, and the Buddha of exorcism. Kill. Buddha was compassionate, but also angry. At this moment, it was clear that the Buddha king was enraged and had the heart of a bodhisattva. He used thunderous methods and spat out murderous sounds. His hand formed the Vajra seal, and his arm swung down like a Vajra pestle. Kacha kacha. For a moment, the entire formation emitted the sound of an aged machine. At the end of the day, this was only the operation of a level 3 spirit root, and not a formation expert. Therefore, even though he had mobilized the power of the entire formation, it was inevitable that he would lose sight of the other. It was a little shaky. However, this did not affect the power of the Buddha's attack. Buzz. Rune Puppet Deity Emperor's remaining strength collided with the Buddha's counterattack. The entire formation exploded. The nodes of the array formation exploded like a series of cannons. Fang Qingshan had already retreated to the edge of the array formation, adding layer after layer of defense on his body. Even so, he was like a lone boat in the huge waves of the ocean, being lifted up by the aftermath and drifting with the current. Kong Chong and the others were no exception. In fact, they were even more miserable. As for the center of the battle, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The vacuum shattered, and pitch-black cracks that looked like spider webs appeared in the silver-white void barrier, extending for an unknown amount of time and space. This attack had completely exhausted the power of the talisman, and the phantom of the divine emperor turned into mottled light spots like a dreamy bubble that dissipated with the wind. Although the spirituality of the great Buddha also looked miserable, he had survived, and the entire formation was slowly healing under the Buddha's light. Upon seeing this scene, Kong Chong and the others were instantly shocked. They did not expect that their trump card would not be able to do anything to the spirituality of the great Buddha. If they could not break the formation, they probably only had one option left, and that was to quickly crush the token. Yes, they had to hurry. Otherwise, if they were attacked by the edifying light like before, they might not even have the chance to escape. However, they were very indignant about this. After all, they did not gain anything after entering. The treasure was right in front of them, but they did not have the ability to obtain it. Instead, they lost a life-saving talisman. How could they be indignant about that? Just as Kong Chong and the others were thinking about whether they should continue to use their trump card, Fang Qingshan, who had been constantly prepared, had a glint of light flashing in his eyes. "Break!" he exclaimed softly. All of a sudden, a large flag that was surrounded by lightning flew out of the eternal thunderbolt pool. The flagpole was like a long spear that could pierce through the sky. When the flag was unfurled, it displayed Fang Qingshan's immortal thunder tribulation. Back then, when Fang Qingshan was facing the last thunder tribulation, he used the timeless arc and broke through it. Not only did he survive the thunder tribulation, but he also gained a lot. In particular, he gained the Thunder Gathering Pagoda, the Eternal Thunderbolt Pool, and the shocking thunder flag. These three treasures were all related to thunderbolts. In the heavens, what else was closer to the origin of thunderbolts than the thunder tribulation? The shocking thunder flag itself was not an ordinary item. The flagpole was transformed from the thunder spear that was no weaker than the gourd of life and death, and the flag was transformed from Pangu's skin. Given the strength of Pangu's physical body, he was probably not inferior to the current Fang Qingshan. These two items were entangled by the Dutian thunder and nurtured by the creation of heaven and earth. Finally, they were integrated into the timeless Arkansas. As such, the power of the shocking thunder flag could be imagined. Most importantly, this item was soaked in the eternal thunderbolt pool by Fang Qingshan day and night. Although it did not improve as quickly as using the Island of Life and Death to repair the Gourd of Life and Death, its power was still increasing day by day. Tut, Fang Qingshan thought. The shocking thunder flag rumbled and expanded against the wind. The origin of thunderbolts on it seemed to have come to life, and it had the power to destroy the world. Rumble. A bolt of lightning fell from the thunderclap flag. It was not any weaker than the previous power of the stars. Dense, ancient thunder runes appeared, each of them the size of a fist. They were deep and simple, describing the Tao of thunderbolts, rewarding good and punishing evil, creating and destroying things. The Tao of thunderbolts was destruction, and the Tao of punishment was also creation and the Tao of reward. If one could not get through it, everything would be over. If one got through it, everything would be clear. At this moment, the sky was filled with thunder and lightning. One-hit kill. From the beginning, Fang Qingshan wanted to find the flaw of the array and break it in one hit. Unfortunately, this array was too strong, and it was suppressed by a level 3 treasure, so he failed. Now, with the Divine Emperor's talisman and the spiritual Buddha, there was finally a flaw, and Fang Qingshan seized the opportunity. Chapter 14:31. The more he did, the more mistakes he would make. It was better to stay still than to move. As long as he moved, his flaws would be exposed. This was what Fang Qingshan had planned. Unfortunately, his cultivation was not enough to shake the formation. In other words, he had to hold back, so he did not go all out. Therefore, he could not grasp the opportunity. But now, after exchanging blows with Kong Chang's life-saving talisman, Fang Qingshan finally grasped the opportunity. This time, the outcome of the Elysium Lotus formation could not be changed. Formations were easy to break, and hard to break. Easy to break, because as long as one found the formation eye, had enough strength, and moved fast enough, the formation could be easily disintegrated. Hard to break, because if one could not find the eye and seize the opportunity, he would be helpless like Fang Qingshan previously. He might even be gradually eroded by the formation, and finally, he would not be able to make a comeback. After all, formations were a supreme technique for the weak to defeat the strong. Rumble. The formation eye was broken, and the entire formation collapsed like dominoes. Those Dharma protectors and Buddhists who had been enlightened were like time bombs. They exploded into pieces, blood flowed like a river, and corpses were everywhere. The lotuses that were formed from the spiritual energy nodes under them were like a mirage, collapsing one after another. In the end, the formation was broken, and only the Elysium Lotus formation was left standing. However, as the formation eye, the Elysium Lotus formation was also greatly injured and looked like it had just recovered from a long illness. This was because most of the injuries had been distributed, otherwise it might have injured its origin. Phew! Seeing this scene, Fang Qingshan, Kong Chang, and the remaining disciples could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. This was a happy ending. The formation was broken, and they were free. Most importantly, the level 3 spiritual root did not suffer much damage. If the origin of the spiritual root was greatly damaged because of breaking the formation, they would definitely vomit blood. This was a level 3 spiritual root, and its value was one level higher than a level 3 supreme treasure. Many divine emperors might not even have one. Although he had lost a life-saving talisman, it was still worth it to be able to obtain a rank 3 spiritual root. The only thing that made everyone unhappy was that a few of their companions did not persevere and perished here. Kong Chong and the others were all gloomy. Not good. Just when everyone was overjoyed that they had escaped and that they were about to gain something, but they were also sad that their fellow disciples had died, Fang Qingshan's expression suddenly changed drastically. Without much time to think, the timeless arc flew out and picked him up. Then, the great void god armor, the cauldron of heaven and earth, the bell of chaos, and various other treasures formed a defensive barrier. Everything happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. Kong Chong and the others had yet to recover from their emotions. He was stunned by the sight of it. Almost at the same time, a sharp killing intent suddenly appeared in Fang Qingshan's perception. Almost as soon as it appeared, it landed in front of him. This aura was not very strong at first, just like the true disciple who used a shadow dagger to launch a sneak attack on him. However, in the blink of an eye, it grew exponentially and reached an astonishing level in an instant. A ray of light shone. At first, the light was tiny and as gentle as the rising sun. However, in the next moment, it became blazing like the sun in the sky. It was like a star, burning and exploding in an instant, turning into a blazing sun, filling all directions and illuminating everything. Accompanying the intense light was an unparalleled aura, like a storm or a meteorite. Drowning, devouring, tearing, boom! An earth-shattering explosion rang out. Even Fang Qingshan could not help but close his eyes subconsciously under the blinding brilliance. At the same time, a figure appeared in front of Fang Qingshan. The sword pierced out. Even though he was separated by many treasures, his physical body, which was comparable to a treasure, felt a slight pain, as though he was being pierced and torn apart. Looking in front of him, the defenses of the Taishu immortal armor, cauldron of heaven and earth, and the bell of chaos had been pierced. Even the defense of the red lotus of hellfire had been mostly broken. There was even a hidden force penetrating his body. Fortunately, the timeless arc's defense had blocked it, and Fang Qingshan's own defense was not weak. Otherwise, this sword would have been a fatal blow. Emperor, Fang Qingshan gasped. Looking at the voice in front of him, he spat out these two words coldly. Fortunately, Fang Qingshan had felt that something was amiss. Therefore, he did not use his full strength, but let Kong Chong use his trump card. Otherwise, Fang Qingshan might not have been able to withstand this fatal blow. He was already weaker than his opponent, and the enemy was in the open while he was in the dark. At the same time, he also understood what the danger he had sensed previously was. It turned out that the emperor, who was supposed to be sealed in the depths of the cave abode, had actually escaped and was hiding in the dark, ready to strike at any time. Fang Qingshan could only rejoice. Rejoice that the emperor did not strike when he was confused by the formation. Otherwise, he would have been like the others who had been edified, unable to react in time. The emperor is indeed the emperor. Even a half-crippled emperor is still so powerful. He almost broke through my defense. Fang Qingshan thought to himself, "Kill, kill." Both Fang Qingshan and Kong Chong reacted very quickly in the face of the divine emperor, who had suddenly appeared and almost killed them. Almost at the same time, they launched a counterattack. Genius. What was a genius? Geniuses were not just called geniuses because of their natural endowments. Those with great luck, great fortune, and great perseverance were also called geniuses. However, true geniuses needed two things. One was to not panic in the face of danger. No matter what situation they faced, they had to be able to react quickly and use the best methods to deal with it. Two was to not fight for the moment. Even if they failed, they would be able to rise again in the face of adversity. Or else, geniuses who couldn't do the last two things were just shooting stars. Even if they had the upper hand for a while, once they met with misfortune, they would be like a cactus flower. The second point was fine, but regarding the first point, Fang Qingshan and Kong Chong did their best. Even if the situation was extremely dangerous, even if they were facing a god emperor, their first reaction was to counterattack. Of course, it wasn't because they didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. It was because after weighing the pros and cons, it was the best method. Firstly, Normal Undying's first thought when facing a God Emperor was to run. But could they really run? Obviously not. Running would only make them die faster. After all, their speed wasn't as fast as the God Emperor, unless they crushed the token. Secondly, Fang Qingshan and company were not normal Undying. And the reason why Fang Qingshan was willing to come, other than resources, was because he wanted to see the God Emperor's methods. And running without a fight was not his style. Of course, the key was that while this God Emperor was powerful, as long as he couldn't kill in one hit, there was nothing to be afraid of. Chapter 1432. What was the scariest thing about facing a divine emperor? It wasn't that they had high cultivation levels or strong combat strength. Fang Qingshan and the others already knew that. What they were afraid of was being killed as soon as they came up, and not even being able to withstand a single blow. In that case, even if they had 1,000 tricks up their sleeves, they wouldn't be able to use them. If they died before they could even succeed, they themselves would be helpless, let alone the others. As long as they weren't killed in one blow, it was an opportunity for them, and they wouldn't be in too much danger. After all, they all had trump cards. As long as they were given time to use them, they could at least escape unscathed, even if they couldn't turn the tables. Putting Fang Qingshan aside, the All-Heaven chessboard wasn't just for show. The reason why Kong Chong dared to come here, apart from the fact that the Divine Emperors were sealed, and that these Divine Emperors were far inferior to real Divine Emperors, as well as the life-saving talisman that he had used earlier, there was still a sealing talisman. This talisman was actually used together with the previous one. First, he used this talisman to seal the Divine Emperor. Then he used the previous talisman to kill him in one blow. Unfortunately, in order to break the formation, he had already used the killing talisman of the Divine Emperor, and only this sealing talisman was left. Fortunately, he wasn't fighting alone. There was still Fang Qingshan. This was also the reason why Kong Chong had invited Fang Qingshan to go on the adventure with him. Didn't he want to have it all to himself? Was he willing to share it with others? The answer was no. However, it wasn't a matter of whether he wanted to or not, or whether he was willing to or not. It didn't mean that the more daring one was, the more fruitful one would be. In the end, one had to act according to one's ability and eat as much as one could, so that one wouldn't be stuffed to death. If it weren't for Fang Qingshan, even if he had 2 talismans, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to waste them, and would have died in the formation of the Lotus of Bliss first. How unlucky it would be. Putting all this aside, after Kong Chong used the talisman. This time, it was a little different from the last time. Last time, it contained a trace of the origin of a divine emperor, so it was naturally the divine body of a divine emperor. Inside the talisman was a godly emperor's natal divine power that was a sealing technique. In an instant, the symbol puppet crumbled and transformed into a spider that endlessly spat out shackles and chains. It was like weaving a net. The heart was like a double net with thousands of knots in it. Immediately, it enveloped the sneak-attacking deity emperor, an inescapable net with nowhere to run. In an instant, the effect was immediate. Not only was the divine emperor bound in midair, but his aura, which was as bright as the sun in the sky, was also like a deflated balloon, instantly bursting down. Rumble. However, the God Emperor was no pushover either. Even though he was only half crippled and caught off guard, he was still a God Emperor. Even the sempiternal realm direct disciple from before was able to wield such strength, let alone the God Emperor. Sensing the binding force, the God Emperor immediately erupted. His magic power surged, his blood chi spread, and the sword in his hand burst out boundless sword light to help him cut the shackles. However, this sealing mystic art was still pretty decent. In a short period of time, the God Emperor felt as though he had sunk into a swamp. The more he struggled, the more shackles appeared around him. Right now, his entire body was like a huge cocoon that was wrapped tightly. It's not that simple. Seeing this, Fang Qingshan snorted coldly. How could he miss such a good opportunity? If he couldn't use his powerful means and finish the battle in one fell swoop, once the God Emperor broke free, Fang Qingshan and the others would have to crush the token and escape. At that time, losing face was a small matter, But missing the inner disciple competition, losing a direct disciple, and losing the opportunity and reward would be a great loss. Losing a direct disciple was not a big deal. At most, he would complete one more direct disciple trial. After all, his cultivation had reached the immortal realm, and he was at the peak of the late immortal realm. However, missing the top 10 of the inner sect, or even the first place, was really unforgivable. Even with Fang Qingshan's wealth, his heart would bleed. After all, the Dao sect's upper echelon had already decided to reward Fang Qingshan after he showed his face in front of everyone. If he was eliminated here, although it didn't mean that he was weak, the reward would probably be greatly reduced. All right, seeing the God Emperor's aura weakening, Fang Qingshan's eyes lit up. The God Emperor's strength was originally only about 5 levels compared to a real God Emperor. Now that he had been sealed by 2 levels, there was nothing for him to be afraid of. Suppress. Almost at the same time as Kong Chong, the moment the God Emperor was sealed, Fang Qingshan's attack also arrived. Freeze! Fang Qingshan's heart stirred. 3 supreme treasures soared into the sky. A stone bridge, transcending the other side, shrinking a lifetime, crossing thousands of years. A bright lamp, the dead like a husband, full like water, illuminating the past and the future. An ancient bell, suppressing the primordial world, distorting space-time, evolving the mysteries of Hongjun Tiandao, and refining the earth, water, fire, and wind. The 3 supreme treasures erupted at the same time. In an instant, heaven and earth, space-time, spirit, blood, gaze, yuan shun, and even karma and fate seemed to stop at this moment. Space-time stopped. The 3 space-time supreme treasures erupted at the same time, and with the eternal lightning pool as the driving force, the power was so strong that even the God Emperor couldn't react in time, let alone when he was still sealed. From the previous battle in the formation, Fang Qingshan knew that the strength of a level 3 God Emperor was above that of a level 2 immortal. Moreover, a lion would also use its full strength to capture a rabbit. Therefore, even though he knew that the God Emperor before him was only half crippled, he didn't let his guard down. After the bridge of Permitha, the passing water lamp, and the bell of primordial chaos, with a shake of his shoulder, the Zodiac star formation diagram on his body flew out and once again landed on the God Emperor zombie. However, it was obvious that this wasn't protection, but suppression. Suppressing with the power of the formation, isolating the connection between him and the cave abode, preventing him from borrowing the power of heaven and earth. After all, this was his home ground. That wasn't all. Following that, the 9 bends yellow river formation diagram flew out. Fang Qingshan knew that a skinny camel was still bigger than a horse, and a single strand of hair was thicker than a leg. Even though the other party was like a dragon in shallow waters, he might not be bullied by a dog or a prawn. After all, the tiger was still alive. Therefore, at this moment, he really used all his means. He tried his best to weaken the zombie as much as possible. Then, he struck with lightning speed. With the sealing talisman, the 3 supreme treasures of the Chaos Bell, and the suppression from the 2 formation diagrams. In the next moment, Fang Qingshan naturally struck with lightning speed. Success or failure depended on this move. San Lang, a ray of divine light shot into the sky. Within the divine light, one could see a ferocious-looking sawtooth scythe. This scythe was covered with countless mysterious runes, outlining endless Tao rhymes. Vaguely, one could feel an unimaginable sharpness, as if it could cut through everything at any time, bury the entire world. Chapter 1433. The Death Scythe. It was a seal that needed to be sealed, a restraint that needed to be restrained, an imprisonment that needed to be imprisoned. After doing all this, it was time to kill. The Death Scythe was the first strike. Not only was there an endless sharpness on it, there was also an endless amount of death. Countless souls were wailing, struggling, crying, and sinking, but it was difficult for them to escape. This was a killing treasure that was only inferior to the startling Thunder Flag and the Primal Chaos Horn. Although its grade couldn't compare to treasures like the Primal Chaos Bell, Its sharpness and lethality weren't inferior. Although the primal chaos bell was sharp, it had too many functions. It could defend, use sound waves, suppress, and space. It wasn't focused on one, but the death scythe was different. It was a killing treasure. It could attack both the physical and the soul. Almost at the instant it appeared, the surrounding void seemed to descend quietly, as if the netherworld had descended upon it. The temperature suddenly dropped, and the world turned dark. Crack! As the death scythe was taken out, it expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. With every breath, it grew and became tens of thousands of meters long in an instant. At a glance, it seemed to connect the sky and the earth, as if it had pierced through the void. It was like a peerless divine saber that had been hiding its sharpness for a long time. This saber fell from the sky. It was like the yin and yang division, as if the entire world had been split in half. Wherever the saber light went, the world became silent, as if all life had been swallowed and turned into a land of death. There were ghostly cries and wolf howls everywhere. This saber turned the world into the netherworld. This saber was like the arrival of the death god, the arrival of doomsday. Death, slaughter, coldness, despair. This saber didn't seem to be any worse than the startling thunder flag. The reason for this was that last time, when Taoist was sweeping through the dangerous area, the Yin Corpse battlefield, he had obtained a death attribute heaven and earth treasure. He had integrated it into the death scythe, and the death scythe's grade had greatly increased. Then there was Fang Qingshan's training ground, on the Life and Death Island. Not only did it nurture and repair the Life and Death Gourd, it also improved the Death Scythe. The attack of the Death Scythe was only the first step. Fang Qingshan wasn't confident that he could kill a God King with just this treasure. He was not a deity emperor who could injure him through several layers of defensive treasures. According to Fang Qingshan's estimation, the attack of the Death Scythe alone could at most break the Emperor's defense and cause some minor injuries. So after taking out the Death Scythe, he used the Thunderclap flag. However, a large pitch-black flag with brilliance flowing on it stood towering above their heads, fluttering in the wind. It was not the slightest bit smaller than the Death Scythe. Lightning flickered on it, red, purple, black, or gold. It was a natural phenomenon, and its brilliance was dazzling. Those who didn't know would think that it was the manifestation of the lightning Tao's source. Rumble. As the wind blew, the flag fluttered. It was as if the sky had split open, and billions of lightning bolts poured down from it. Some were in the shape of arcs, some were in the shape of balls, some were in the shape of spiritual treasures, some were in the shape of plants, some were in the shape of animals, and some were even in the shape of humans. They were densely packed together, and just one look at them would cause one's heart to tremble in fear. Indescribable lightning descended, destroying time and space, destroying everything. Each of the lightning strikes had tremendous destructive power. Even an ordinary immortal realm expert would be wounded severely. The thick lightning strikes had created a terrifying sea of lightning. There were so many lightning strikes that they couldn't even count. As they gathered together, even Fang Qingshan didn't dare to face them alone. Instantly, tens of thousands of divine lightning strikes followed the Death Scythe and bombarded the God Emperor. Moreover, it was at the place where the Death Scythe had just broken his defense. Wounds on top of wounds. At first, it was just a minor wound, but in just a blink of an eye, it was more than 10 times worse. Moreover, compared to the Death Scythe's attack, the lightning strikes could hurt him much more. Anyway, lightning strikes were the nemesis of all evil things. Not to mention this half-crippled God Emperor, he was also an evil being, so the lightning strikes could subdue him. How could he not get hurt when such a thick and mighty lightning sea covered him? For the time being, lightning strikes fell like a heavy downpour. It was the second strike. Cheng Yaojin still had 3 strikes. Thus, Fang Qingshan's third strike came shortly after. This time it was the Life and Death Gourd. The Life and Death Gourd was the strongest spirit treasure in Fang Qingshan's hands. It was similar to the Bell of Chaos. It was powerful, but it had many functions. It could attack, defend, and trap people. This time, Fang Qingshan naturally wanted to make use of his offensive power. The black and white life and death gourd hovered above the heaven gate, releasing endless light from the mouth of the gourd. Rumble. Looking from a distance, it was almost the same as when the thunder flag exploded. However, the thunder flag exploded like the thunder principal origin, which evolved into a vast sea of lightning tides. But the life and death gourd exploded with the sword principal origin, which evolved into a world of swords. The black and white sword energy burst out, stretching for hundreds of thousands of miles. 9 lives heavenly silkworm, 3-legged underworld raven, immortal bird. They faced the sky and roared fiercely. Billions of sword energy of life and death slashed out like a tide. These sword energy didn't seem to be randomly slashed out. Instead, they had some kind of trajectory. They were slashed out with basic sword techniques, either slashing or stabbing. Instantly, they scattered in the void, turning into a storm of sword energy that stormed toward the God Emperor. Of course, they were going to land at the place where the Death Scythe and the Thunder Flag had broken. Flows of condensed sword light slashed down, cutting the void. Countless sword lights sparkled in the void. They enlarged the wound one more time. At this moment, the God Emperor was so enraged. He was a God Emperor, but he failed to ambush an immortal realm expert. Moreover, he went for wool and came home shorn. Now, he was trapped by 2 juniors. He didn't mind the previous seal, as it was the work of an expert at the same level as him. However, Fang Qingshan's attack had enraged and frightened him. He was enraged because an immortal realm expert had hurt him and forced him to such a situation. He was frightened by Fang Qingshan's deed. The peak of late stage of immortal realm, the timeless arc at the supreme level, had such a deed. This kind of attacking power was really rare in this world. Moreover, he had encountered it. It was his bad luck. Break, break, break. The God Emperor didn't hesitate to hurt himself to break the seal and restraint. Otherwise, if he continued to be attacked like that, he would fail miserably. The God Emperor was the God Emperor. He didn't care about anything else. The effect showed up immediately. Crack, crack. A series of cracking sounds could be heard. Whether it was the chains created by the divine sealing power that restrained the God Emperor, the 2 formations covering his body, or the confined space and time, all of them sounded like they couldn't bear the heavy burden anymore. It seemed like the God Emperor would get rid of them in the next moment. Once he got rid of them, it wouldn't be easy to deal with him. At least, he wouldn't stand still and let Fang Qingshan attack him. Chapter 1434. What a great God Emperor! Impressive. Fang Qingshan's expression changed at the sight of this. As an evil ghost, his strength was greatly reduced. Previously, he was restrained by the God Emperor's sealing mystique, and his strength was further reduced. Then, he was sealed and suppressed by the 2 diagrams, and was frozen in mid-air by the 3 treasures. Then he was attacked by the Death Scythe, the Thunderous Flag, and the Gourd of Life and Death. If it were Fang Qingshan, he would have been killed. However, his defense was only broken, and he was slightly injured. It was not even a serious injury. He had underestimated Fang Qingshan and the others, which was why he was caught unprepared. Now that he had erupted, the situation became very disadvantageous to Fang Qingshan and the others. According to Fang Qingshan's observation, the God Emperor would be able to break free in no time. At that time, the God Emperor would not stand still and let them attack him. Based on the God Emperor's self-recovery speed, if Fang Qingshan's attack was not strong enough, the damage would not be able to keep up with the God Emperor's recovery speed. It's a pity that you are no longer who you used to be, and you have lost the upper hand. If that's the case, I can't do anything to you. I might as well kill myself. Fang Qingshan was a proud person. The reason why he was willing to come here with Kongchong was partly for the resources and partly to fight with the God Emperor. Now, after the clash, he realized the gap between him and the God Emperor. But under the premise of having such an advantage, if he could not take down a half-crippled God Emperor, it would be a little unreasonable. Therefore, although he had a lot of thoughts in his mind, his actions were not slow at all. After the Gourd of Life and Death, he released the Red Lotus of Fire. Although the red lotus of fire was a defensive treasure, it was different from the great void immortal armor. This was because his hellfire could also attack, and it was very strong. 1. The flower blooms and sees me, and I see everyone. Wherever the lotus went, there was a sea of fire. For a moment, it was as though the Elysium lotus formation was activated again. It instantly evolved into a lotus kingdom. However, unlike the power of salvation from before, the lotus before him was filled with scorching heat and incinerating destruction. In an instant, the divine emperor's entire body was engulfed in raging flames, burning more and more vigorously. Dry wood and raging fire, heavenly thunder and earthly fire. When the golden wind and jade do meet, it surpasses countless things in the mortal world. As for the attack of hellfire, it was probably even stronger than the thunderclap flag from before. Although lightning could restrain evil beings, hellfire was superior and more domineering. Any living being that had experienced slaughter, been contaminated by killing intent, or even committed endless sins would immediately explode like hot oil touching a spark. It would turn into a monstrous fire that burned their body. Without merit, without supreme willpower, the final result would be being burned to ashes by the fire of karma. It was extremely terrifying, and it had always been a fire that countless people in the world feared. This God King was a high-ranking member of the Crimson Firmament School. In the past, in order to create a God King, the Crimson Firmament School had incurred the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of the people. Although he wasn't the only one, the karma that fell on him was still too numerous to count. Moreover, after he transformed into an evil being, he was similarly filled with evil, and the amount of karma in his body was simply unimaginable. If the death scythe from before only broke through his defense, the thunderclap flag only aggravated his injuries, and a life and death gourd further increased the results of the battle. However, it didn't damage his foundation. As long as he got rid of the restraint with his recovery speed, it wouldn't take long for his injuries to recover. However, the attack of the fire of karma was an explosive point, and it instantly gave him unprecedented damage. Moreover, this injury wasn't something that could be healed by self-recovery. As long as the karma in his body didn't dissipate, the fire of karma wouldn't extinguish. If it was in the past, if he hadn't experienced the great battle of extermination, if he hadn't died and turned into an evil being, he might have been able to rely on his willpower to forcefully endure it and turn all his sins into ashes. He might even be able to rebuild after breaking. But now, there was no such possibility at all, although he knew that the chances of him making it through were extremely slim. But Fang Qingshan didn't let his guard down, because he knew if he still had any trump cards in his hands. Although there was nothing else that could extinguish the fire of karma other than karma and willpower, the world was vast and full of strange things. Even Fang Qingshan couldn't guarantee that nothing would go wrong. As the saying went, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if his willpower was still strong enough? What if he still had a backup plan? Therefore, even at this point, Fang Qingshan still didn't let his guard down. In the end, he even drove the timeless ark directly toward the Emperor God. Ram him. His last move was to use the body of the timeless ark and the horn of chaos to directly crash into the Emperor God. In the world of martial arts, there was nothing that couldn't be overcome, but speed was the only thing that couldn't be overcome. It could also be used in cultivation, especially when it was fast and powerful. It was simply an existence that had a cheat code. For a moment, the golden light of the nirvana converged, and its power was condensed to the extreme. Then, it turned into a stream of light, breaking through the air and rushing toward the Emperor God. At the front, the tip of the horn of chaos flashed with divine light that was even sharper than the death scythe. Wherever it went, time and space, karma, fate, reincarnation, and everything else were torn apart. Break! First it was the hellfire, and now it was the timeless Arkansas. The Emperor God also knew that he was in danger. With all his strength, he finally broke free from the shackles of the seal. With a shake of his arms, the Zodion Star Array and the Yellow River Array were torn apart like silk. The time and space that had been frozen by the three treasures of the Bell of Chaos shattered like porcelain. Just as he was about to leave, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Dong! Dong! The sound of the bell and the sound of the drum alternated. In an instant, his movements became sluggish. In fact, this was because the Emperor God was seriously injured first, and then his attention was attracted by the timeless ark and the hellfire. He was not prepared. That was why he was slowed down by the sound waves of the Bell of Chaos and the drum of 10,000 beasts. However, he reacted very quickly. However, it was already too late. The timeless ark was so fast that it didn't give the Emperor God a chance to dodge. It directly bombarded him. Bang! The wounds on the Emperor God's body caused by the death scythe and the other treasures had mostly healed, and he didn't look so hideous anymore. If it weren't for the fact that he was sealed and unable to use his full strength, coupled with the Hellfire's critical attack, he might have almost fully recovered. But under the attack of the Horn of Chaos, the wound was undoubtedly torn open again, and a hole was made. The Emperor God let out a shrill scream. Clearly, this attack had really hurt his foundation. Although the Hellfire was strong, it was indestructible, unending, and powerful. The attack of the Horn of Chaos, on the other hand, was immediate. It was powerful enough to break through everything, and it was powerful enough to defeat everything. Coupled with the damage from before, the Horn of Chaos instantly injured the Emperor God. Chapter 1435. After the timeless ark ascended to become a supreme, Fang Qingshan had filled it with many treasures of heaven and earth to enhance its foundation. In terms of defense, the strongest was naturally the Red Lotus of Fire. This was because it was a pure defensive treasure, and it was of a very high grade. A lotus-shaped spiritual treasure had outstanding defensive power. Although the Bell of Chaos was similar to the timeless ark, it had too many effects, so its defensive power was slightly inferior. In terms of grade, the strongest was naturally the Gourd of Life and Death, which was a high-grade second-grade treasure. Because it was located on the island of Life and Death, and because Fang Qingshan cultivated the reincarnation path, its foundation had been strengthened, surpassing the wishing pool. Even without the timeless ark, it would not be difficult to break through to the top-grade second-grade. In terms of offense, the Death Scythe, Bell of Chaos, Thunderous Flag, and Horn of Chaos were not very different, whether it was in terms of grade or other aspects. But in terms of actual use, the Horn of Chaos was still a notch higher. This was not because the Horn of Chaos was of a higher grade and had a deeper foundation. Of course, the Horn of Chaos was not of a low grade. It was the toughest part of the demon god, like the dragon pearl of a dragon or the feather of a phoenix. As Fang Qingshan obtained more and more good things, the Horn of Chaos could naturally get a share of what the Death Scythe could get. Therefore, its grade had also broken through to second grade. Similar to the Reincarnation Awl and the Double Mosquito Sting, it was a single target attack. Therefore, it was extremely ferocious. Not to mention the sky, it could even poke a hole in the river of time and space, river of fate, and mortal karma. When the timeless ark ascended to the eternal realm, it might even be able to poke a hole in the boundless void and reach the primordial world. Of course, the Horn of Chaos was not that powerful at the moment. Even if it could do so in the future, it would not be due to the Horn of Chaos alone. This was because it was used in tandem with the timeless ark's main body. Therefore, the attack just now could seriously injure the God Emperor and injure his foundation. The God Emperor finally broke free. Enduring the pain, he slashed out with the sword in his hand. A drawn-out sword hum, accompanied by an ancient and vicissitudes of life, rang out along with the divine Emperor's slash. His voice was like thunder. Amidst the whistling of the sword, the divine will and spirit shook. In that instant, Fang Qingshan felt as though the world had turned into a vast expanse of whiteness. He could not see or hear anything else. It was as though the greatest sound was devoid of sound, and the greatest elephant was devoid of form. If he had been the one controlling the timeless ark, this moment of hesitation would have put him at a disadvantage. Moreover, he was not as good as the God Emperor. Now that he was at a disadvantage, it was easy to imagine his ending. Fortunately, it was the Thunder Emperor who made the move now, and he only borrowed Fang Qingshan's authority and magic power. Even so, the power of the Divine Emperor's furious attack was unimaginable. Compared to the Divine Emperor talisman in Kong Chang's hand, it was not inferior. Even though the Divine Emperor had turned into an evil being when the sword slashed down, there was still a holy, majestic, supreme, and harmonious sword aura that was even more scorching than the sun. It contained a supreme battle intent that seemed to be able to tear the heavens and the earth apart, and it exploded with a loud rumble. Thousands of sword lights exploded. Some were sharp, some were majestic, some were hidden, some were killing into the past, some were slashing into the future, and so on and so forth. Bam, bam, bam. This time, before Fang Qingshan could react, the sword slashed on the timeless Arkansas. The defenses of the Taishu immortal armor, cauldron of heaven and earth, life and death gourd, bell of chaos, and even the red lotus of hellfire were all pierced through, and the timeless ark was also slashed millions of miles away. The eternal heavenly vessel was sent flying back. Wherever it passed, the remnant force of its impact would shatter everything in its path, turning them into countless tiny meteors that were sent flying. Even a body of the timeless ark had terrible cracks. However, although the God Emperor's attack was extraordinary, it stopped there. In the end, it was not able to slash the timeless ark in one blow. At this moment, the old force had just dissipated, and the new force had not been regenerated yet. After all, he had been severely injured by Fang Qingshan previously, and he had to break free from the seals, restraints, and shackles, especially when he had to suppress the hellfire in his body. Therefore, at this moment, although the sword chi was awe-inspiring, Fang Qingshan was not afraid. I want to see if it's you who can't hold on anymore, or if it's me. Fang Qingshan endured the pain in his body and drove the timeless ark over again. Hit me again. As soon as he finished speaking, the Permatha heavenly vessel didn't stop at all, and it charged forward once more. The horn of chaos shone brightly with divine light and exploded with powerful destructive power. Once again, it charged over at an inhuman speed. It was so fast. It was amazing. It was as if it was traveling directly in the void, shuttling back and forth. It was as if it was swimming in the void, as if it was an ocean. All that could be seen was a flash of divine light. When it looked again, it had already appeared in front of the God Emperor. Boom! Under the attack, the void around it collapsed on the spot. Countless elements of earth, fire, water, and wind roared and rolled. More importantly, the God Emperor's flesh and blood flew everywhere. The hellfire that had just been suppressed erupted again. Oh, damn it, damn it. Although the God Emperor roared in anger and kept swinging the sword in his hand, he could not change his fate of falling into a disadvantageous position. Hit again, hit to your death. Fang Qingshan did not care at all about the results of the battle. Instead, he ordered the timeless ark to keep fluttering its sails and increasing its speed. At the fastest speed and with the greatest force, it tried to hit the God Emperor as many times as possible. This hit was like Gong Gong's angry attack on Mount Buzhou. This hit was like the collapse of heaven and earth, the destruction of the world, and the destruction of everything. This hit caused the God Emperor to bleed. His flesh and blood flew everywhere, and his origin was severely damaged. This hit. However, although Fang Qingshan was crazy, the God Emperor was not someone to be trifled with, especially since he had nothing to lose. He had already fallen hundreds of thousands of years ago. The only reason he was still alive and well was because of the resentment and obsession in his heart. If he could kill Fang Qingshan, who was obviously a seed disciple of the Dao sect, it would not matter even if he died. Therefore, he also went crazy. He completely disregarded the injuries on his body and even used secret and forbidden techniques, such as the blood sacrifice technique, which damaged his origin, to increase his combat power. The sword in his hand slashed out again and again. Every beam of sword light flashed with a supreme light, carrying with it the characteristics of cutting through the world. It was extremely accurate as it slashed out. Every beam of sword light slashed the body of the timeless Arkansas. Moreover, just like Fang Shan, every beam of sword energy accurately slashed at the place where the God Emperor's defense had been previously broken. Chapter 1436. Great minds think alike. At this moment, Fang Shan and Yi Lingshan were really going all out. They were going all out, not holding back at all. Of course, they couldn't hold back either. This was especially true for Fang Shan. His opponent was a divine emperor. Although he thought highly of himself, he wasn't so arrogant that he could look down on the divine emperor. Of course, Fang Shan knew that he had a backup plan. As long as he crushed the token, he could escape unscathed. However, he didn't do so. Firstly, one of his real goals was to fight the divine emperor and see how big the gap between him and the divine emperor was. Retreating without a fight would be going against his original intention. If he retreated now, the loss would be huge. This time, he could only be a spectator in the inter-sect competition, not to mention the rewards from the sect. Just the timeless arc being injured to this extent was the first time since its inception. His loss was so great that if he couldn't take down the divine emperor and use his collection to make up for the loss, Fang Shan would really vomit blood and die. Moreover, his opponent was just a half-crippled divine emperor. He might still have a chance. He didn't feel any fatal danger, so he naturally wouldn't run away. Most importantly, he had to have a heart of treading on thin ice and do things bravely and diligently. When faced with difficulties, he would want to escape. This time, he was facing a half-crippled divine emperor. He had a trump card that could save his life, but what about the next time? When enemies meet on a narrow path, the brave will win. Without a heart that was stronger than the strong, one would never become a strong person. Therefore, he didn't retreat. Even this time, even when the timeless arc was half-crippled, Fang Shan didn't retreat. Instead, he controlled the timeless arc again and again, colliding with the divine emperor, not giving him a chance to breathe. If he didn't go crazy, he wouldn't survive. Fang Shan believed that he would be the last one to survive. As long as he could get through this, even if he didn't gain anything, Fang Shan's trip would be worthwhile. After all, actual combat was the best teacher. He had the experience of fighting against the divine emperor and winning. Even though the divine emperor was only half-crippled, such an experience was extremely beneficial to his cultivation. He wouldn't exchange it for a grade 3 treasure. It was the same with the emperor god. He was a god emperor. Did he not dare to risk his life against a junior at the immortal realm? Putting aside the fact that Fang Shan was a seated contestant of the Tao Will sect, a sect that had destroyed the Crimson Firmament sect and himself. A mere undying junior had forced him to such a state. If he didn't fight back, he would become a laughingstock. The divine emperor had lost all his face. Therefore, for the sake of resources, for the sake of experience, for the sake of willpower, for the sake of the great Tao, for revenge, for face, for relief, the two of them attacked recklessly. If you hit me, I'll cut you with my sword. Back and forth, dragons fighting in the wild, their blood black and yellow. Not good. When immortals fought, mortals suffered. Fang Shan and his companion attacked recklessly. Kong Chong and the others, who had retreated to the edge of the cave residence, wanted to cry but had no tears. Even though they were far away from the center of the battlefield, the shockwaves of the two's fight still made them pale. For a moment, they were like small boats in a storm, drifting with the waves. They didn't know when the boat would be destroyed and they would die. Fortunately, as an inner disciple of the Tao Will sect, the existence of the immortal realm was not an undeserved reputation, especially Kong Chong. Although the two divine emperor-level talismans in his hands had been used, he still had many life-saving methods. Everyone had joined forces to help each other. Plus, they weren't specifically targeting them. So, for a while, there weren't too many problems. However, their hands and backs were drenched in cold sweat. They were ready to crush the tokens in their hands at any time. The Crimson Firmament Realm. In the southeast, A charming and seemingly weak young woman had just plucked a high-rank 2 spirit flower when she suddenly sensed something. She raised her head and looked into the distance. A world manifested there, rumbling endlessly. 2 auras tangled with each other inside. One side was crisscrossed with sword chi, while the other side was the timeless Arkansas. Just by looking at it, one couldn't help but feel intimidated, because where the sword chi crisscrossed, the pressure alone was enough to make an immortal realm expert breathless. On the side of the timeless arc, it was even more dilapidated. Inside, one could even see the broken cabins. There were materials floating out of the cabins. They flew in all directions. This is the Divine Emperor's cave residence. Fang Qingshan. Fang Qingshan is good. He can actually fight with the Divine Emperor like this. He really deserves his reputation. It seems that I should also perform well. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll be completely suppressed by him. The battle between Fang Qingshan and the Divine Emperor was so loud that even though the Divine Emperor's cave residence isolated it, it couldn't completely calm down. It was fine outside the Crimson Heaven realm, but in the Crimson Heaven realm, everyone was shocked. The ordinary inner sect disciples were just watching the show, and they were shocked. As for the elite inner sect disciples, the Dark Horses, and the top 10 inner sect disciples, while they were shocked, a desire to compete with the heavens arose in their hearts. They were not willing to let Fang Qingshan monopolize all the glory. At this moment, everyone was tempted. They weren't people without a background. If Kong Chang had a trump card, why wouldn't they have one? If Fang Qingshan could fight with the Divine Emperor like this, how bad could they be? Therefore, the ordinary immortal realm intersect disciples were still collecting resources everywhere, while the elite disciples started to form alliances in 2s and 3s. They were preparing to attack the Divine Emperor's cave residence like Fang Qingshan did. First, they already coveted the resources of the Divine Emperor's cave residence. Second, if Fang Qingshan dared and could do it, why wouldn't they? Why couldn't they? Third, if they didn't do this, they wouldn't have any chance of catching up to Fang Qingshan. After all, the harvest from the Divine Emperor's cave residence wasn't that easy to catch up to. If they couldn't catch up, if only Fang Qingshan fought the Divine Emperor alone, then this intersect competition would be his solo show. Although they knew that Fang Qingshan was extraordinary, these people were all geniuses. Why would they give up so easily? Therefore, not long after, several Divine Emperor's caves were opened. For a moment, the entire Crimson Heaven realm began to shake. What about the outside world? They were still shocked by the appearance of the Divine Emperor's aura. However, they soon realized that they were shocked too early. Because of the isolation of the Crimson Heaven realm, they originally thought that they could only use their trump cards to attack. They didn't expect that Fang Qingshan and the Divine Emperor's battle would be so intense. This clearly wasn't something that could be achieved with just one trump card. That wasn't all. Then, the sudden appearance of several Divine Emperor's auras stunned them even more. It wasn't just them. The higher-ups of the Tao, sect, and the technique imparting elder who presided over the intersect competition were the same. This intersect competition seemed to be very different from the beginning. At this moment, everyone was half happy and half worried. Chapter 1437. However, the commotion in the Crimson Firmament realm made everyone from the Tao sect feel both happy and worried. They were happy because they had opened the Crimson Firmament realm this time. Firstly, they wanted to intimidate the other sections. Secondly, they really wanted to give their disciples a great opportunity. After all, under normal circumstances, the Crimson Firmament realm was only open for the Divine Emperor. This time, they had obviously seized the opportunity and lived up to their expectations. Moreover, judging from the intensity of the fight, their disciples were really good and had strong successors. As for the worry, they were surprised that so many people had gone to explore the Divine Emperor's cave abode. Although their ambition was commendable, it was not that simple in reality. After all, it was the Divine Emperor, not a phoenix that had fallen to the ground. However, they were still more happy than worried. After all, they still had the safety token. As long as they were not killed by the Divine Emperor, they could still survive as long as they crushed the token in time. Fang Qingshan obviously did not know that because of him, this year's inner disciple competition was completely out of his control. Anyone who had some confidence in themselves was no longer satisfied with searching for ordinary resources and heavenly treasures step by step. Instead, they began to explore the divine emperor's cave abode. Moreover, it was not just one or two people. The top 10 inner disciples, several dark horses, and even people like Kong Chong, who were not among the top 10 inner disciples, were second only to them. They all began to act upon hearing the news. In this regard, Fang Qingshan did not know about it. Even if he did, he would not care. He only cared about his own gains. What did the actions of others have to do with him? Not to mention the fact that even if they could reap the same benefits as him, so what? The Crimson Firmament Realms trial was only a beginner competition. The real final still depended on the arena competition. He did not believe that he could not pass the beginner competition after obtaining the gains from the Divine Emperor's cave abode. Moreover, was it really that easy to enter the Divine Emperor's cave abode? Even with Kong Chang's 2 trump cards and Fang Qingshan's all-out effort, he still ended up fighting with his life on the line. He wasn't that optimistic about the others' chances. Although the mansion that Fang Qingshan had entered seemed to be an outstanding existence among the early Divine Emperors, it didn't mean that the other Divine Emperors were inferior. Furthermore, if he accidentally entered the mansion of a mid-stage Divine Emperor, he would be in deep trouble. Putting all this aside, the fight between the Emperor God and Fang Qingshan had reached the final stage. Heaven and Earth's will, bless me, kill. The Divine Emperor finally used his last trump card, which was the will of heaven and earth belonging to the abode. This cave abode was his cave abode, and he was the one who created it. The reason why Fang Qingshan had used the Zhoutian Star Formation and the 9-turn Yellow River Formation was not only to suppress the Shenhuang's strength, but also to cut off the connection between him and the cave residents, so that he would lose his geographical advantage. Unfortunately, the Divine Emperor was not that easy to deal with. However, Fang Qingshan's actions were not without effect. At least, he had gained the upper hand and severely injured the Shenhuang, which made the glimmer of victory shine brighter. Rumble. Thunder rumbled in the void without warning, and the thunderbolts were as dense as rain. It appeared extremely abruptly. At a glance, the void seemed to have turned into a sea of thunder. Suddenly, the dark clouds and the sea of thunder were separated in an instant. In the void, a golden eye appeared out of thin air. In this golden eye, one seemed to be able to see countless mysterious divine chains of laws flashing incessantly, flickering indeterminately. It exuded endless majesty. The moment it appeared, countless living beings felt as if their bodies were put on an invisible shackle, bearing great pressure. The eye of Hongjun Tiandao belonged to the origin of the cavern world, Hongjun Tiandao. The golden eye blinked, and with a swoosh, the power of the origin turned into a divine pillar that reached the sky and fell straight into the Shenhuang's body. The next moment, the Shenhuang's whole body swelled up, as if there was infinite power in his body. The hellfire was suppressed, and his injuries were healed. He seemed to have returned to his peak state all of a sudden, becoming even more ferocious. However, as time passed, something seemed to be wrong. This was because, in general, summoning the Hongjun Tiandao was only a part of the summoning. After that, the Hongjun Tiandao would retreat. But at this moment, the Hongjun Tiandao did not retreat, as if it wanted to pour all its power into the Shenhuang's body. Or perhaps he was hit by the Absorbing Star's grand technique, Dark North mysterious art, and so on, and could not stop it. However, the Shenhuang did not feel good either. It seemed that his body could not bear the burden, and his skin was cracking. For a moment, as the Shenhuang's aura became more and more vigorous, the heavenly eye in the sky became weaker and weaker. Obviously, the Shenhuang's summoning of the will of heaven and earth was a little different from ordinary summoning. This was not borrowing, but directly seizing. This was probably the reason why the Hongjun Tiandao plotted against Pangu, Wu people, and Sanxing in the desolation. After all, Pangu opened the desolation. If he existed, he would be like the Shan Huang summoning the Hongjun Tiandao's eye at this moment. The heaven and earth of the desolation would desire him. This was obviously not something the supreme Hongjun Tiandao was willing to do. Not to mention Hongjun Tiandao, anyone with an independent personality would not be willing to do so. Kill. It was a pity that the Shan Huang was the real founder of the abode of heaven and earth. Although he had fallen, he did not completely perish, and the Hongjun Tiandao had no way to resist. Moreover, the Hongjun Tiandao had also suffered heavy losses in the war back then. They could not resist. Putting all these aside, the Shan Huang who had been blessed by the Hongjun Tiandao seemed to be a little weak, but he did not care. Anyway, there was only one attack. Whether it succeeded or not, he would die in the end. After all, if he could not kill Fang Qingshan, he would be killed by Fang Qingshan. And if he killed Fang Qingshan, did you think the people of the Dao sect would let him go? Therefore, what he wanted the most now was to drag someone down with him. For a moment, his eyes were cold as he looked down at the earth. All his emotions seemed to have disappeared, as if he was really a creature from the heaven realm, high and mighty, about to carry out the divine punishment and walk in the human world. As soon as he finished speaking, his whole body even shriveled up. A shocking sword chi suddenly flew out from his hand, and it stretched for hundreds of thousands of meters. This sword seemed to suppress the entire cavern world and even the entire crimson firmament world. It was mighty and boundless, and it covered the sky and the earth. The sword light seemed slow, but was actually fast. It dragged a silver light that was whiter than snow, making a sharp sound. The sound had 12 turns, and the first turn could kill. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, the sword light was about to slash the timeless Arkansas everywhere it passed. There was a burst of dazzling silver and golden light, and there were explosions like fireworks. Whirlpools, black holes, nothingness. The sound of the explosions became louder and louder, shaking the earth. You have a backup plan, but don't tell me I don't have one. Seeing this, Fang Qingshan sneered. With a thought, the celestial chessboard flew out and fell into the eternal lightning pool. The previous crazy attacks and the crazy attacks. Actually, the timeless arc could not hold on any longer. Chapter 1438. In fact, it was foreseeable that the timeless arc wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. After all, it was an attack from a god emperor. Although his body had mutated, it was still at the supreme level. Didn't they see the hideous cracks on the timeless arc's body and the eternal divine furnace unit? If it was any other time, it would have been repaired. But at this moment, it wasn't that he didn't want to repair it. On one hand, it was too late. On the other hand, he didn't have the strength to do so. Although the lightning-gathering pagoda was constantly devouring the power of space-time into the eternal lightning pool. In the end, it still couldn't make ends meet. At this moment, there was only a thin layer of lightning water left in the eternal lightning pool. One could imagine how fierce the battle between them was. However, Fang Qingshan couldn't care less about that now. Success or failure depended on this. As the all-heavens chessboard fell into the eternal lightning pool, in a split second, the lightning-gathering pagoda seemed to have turned on a cheat. It immediately released lightning water into the eternal lightning pool, which then transported it to every corner of the timeless Arkansas. Then, with a thought, he shook his body. The timeless arc was like a piece of clothing on Fang Qingshan's body. Rumble. In the next moment, Fang Qingshan's entire body began to expand like a god emperor. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a towering giant. What about the saying that great minds think alike? One borrowed the power of the Hongjun Tiandao. The other became one with the arc. Seeing the god emperor's sword coming at him, Fang Qingshan didn't dodge. Instead, he punched out. He took a step forward and punched out. A terrifying aura turned into the shape of a dragon, whizzing from all directions and freezing space-time. Rumble. A loud noise shook the mountains and rivers. Crack, crack. The cavern world was the first to collapse. Most of its power source had been absorbed by the god emperor. Now, It had no power to defend against the impact of the aftershock. With a whimper, the world collapsed. However, the destruction of the cavern world was secondary. With the point of collision between Fangqingshan and Chunshao Bay as the center, a tidal storm-like sound wave spread out in all directions. The void shook violently, as if two chaotic worlds had exploded. It was as if the bell of the Tao Will sect had been rung completely. The sound of the bell was vast and mighty, sweeping through the heavens and the earth for thousands of years. Countless sparks shot into the surroundings like a myriad of shooting stars, and they descended towards the surroundings. They gave rise to waves of space and destiny, and they penetrated numerous damaged spaces. Suppress. The commotion caused by Fangqingshan's group was so great that the entire Crimson Firmament realm was in turmoil. In the end, the Crimson Firmament realm was no longer what it used to be, especially back then, because the Crimson Firmament realm wanted to accumulate God Emperors. The origin of the realm was absorbed. Just like how the God Emperor wanted to deal with Fangqingshan previously, he killed the goose that laid the golden eggs. Although the realm had recovered over the years, it was still far from enough. From the looks of it, their battle was about to damage their foundations again. The cultivation imparting elder, who was in charge of the inner disciple competition, immediately executed his boundless divine ability and used the token to stabilize the cauldron. In the next moment, a vast power descended from the sky like a spring breeze, instantly calming the aftermath of their battle. It protected the treasures and disciples of the sect. Whoosh! From a moment the aftermath spread to the time when the cultivation imparting elder calmed it down, it was just like a rabbit leaping up and a falcon diving down. Not long after, all the attacks were sucked into the cracks of space and returned to nothingness. If it wasn't for the messy scene, those who didn't know would have thought that everything was calm and peaceful, as if nothing had happened. At this moment, looking back at the battlefield, the timeless arc was almost disintegrated. The great void immortal armor was broken. One of the legs of the cauldron of heaven and earth was broken. The bell of chaos was full of cracks. The red lotus of hellfire was broken, and the body of the timeless arc was full of holes. If it wasn't for the fact that the framework was still intact, those who didn't know would definitely not be able to recognize that it was a timeless Arkansas. Even Fangqingshan himself didn't have it any better. His protection divine ability was torn apart. His body that was comparable to a treasure was shattered, and the reincarnation mirror was also like a cracked porcelain. This battle was too tragic. Ever since Fangqingshan started cultivating, he had never been so tragic. But the miserable-looking Fangqingshan's eyes were exceptionally spirited at this moment, and his entire body was filled with fighting spirit. Even though they knew that he was at the end of his rope, no one dared to underestimate him. Although he had paid a high price in this battle, the rewards were also not small, especially the experience of fighting the God Emperor to the death. He wouldn't exchange it for a third-level treasure. However, although he had paid a heavy price, the God Emperor himself wasn't much better off. The treasured sword in his hand was completely broken, and his body was burning with raging flames. This was the hellfire, and he could no longer suppress it. But actually, even without the hellfire, he wasn't much better off. His entire body, flesh, skin, and even his internal organs were all gone. He was relying on his skeleton to hold on. In addition to them, there was another group of people who were also very miserable. They were Kong Chong and the others, who had followed Fangqingshan to explore and had helped a lot in the early stage. At this moment, they were not much better than Fangqingshan and Yifutian. They had worked hard and were barely breathing, just like beggars. At this moment, all of them, including Kong Chong, closed their eyes and sealed their six senses. The reason for this was that they couldn't bear the impact of the sound waves from the battle between Fangqingshan and Yifutian. It was like listening to the Tao. If they forced themselves to observe, not only would they not gain anything, but their willpower would also be severely damaged, and they might even sink forever. Outside their bodies, there was a big bell. It was similar to the Bell of Chaos, but it was a pure defensive treasure, not inferior to the Red Lotus of Hellfire. Previously, they had relied on this treasure to let the outside world wreak havoc, completely isolating them from the aftermath that was enough to kill them 7 or 8 times. All kinds of mysterious runes were faintly discernible on the copper bell, like a flickering lamp that could be extinguished at any time. But it persisted in illuminating the surroundings, stabilizing the area within a radius of a mile, turning it into a pure land. However, at this moment, Fang Qingshan couldn't care less about them, because the Divine Emperor hadn't been killed yet. Although it seemed that he could fall at any time, he was still like a roly-poly toy. Before he fell, he absolutely couldn't let his guard down. Seeing that his opponent was still standing in front of him, he was like a lamp that had run out of oil, completely unable to fight back. For the 9 mountains, all my efforts are in vain. Fang Qingshan sighed inwardly. Although he had gained a lot, he was obviously very unhappy that he had entered a treasure mountain and returned empty-handed. Do I have to crush the token? He tightened his grip on the token. At this moment, he was no longer considering the problem of the opportunity, but the problem of saving his life. Although the opportunity was good, if he missed it this time, there would be a next time. If he lost his life, he wouldn't be able to enjoy the resources of a god emperor. Although there were a lot of thoughts in his mind, he didn't show any on his face. From the outside, Fang Qingshan's fighting spirit was soaring, and his spine was straight. He was still confronting the Divine Emperor. Chapter 1439. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Time seemed to be passing extremely slowly at this moment. No one said a word, and no one moved. Fang Qingshan did not know what state the Divine Emperor was in at the moment. He didn't dare to act rashly, so he could only endure it. At the same time, he was also quietly recovering. If the Divine Emperor still had some strength left, he couldn't not have the slightest ability to resist, right? However, Fang Qingshan was obviously thinking too much. If the Divine Emperor was at his peak, it would not be a big deal. After going through the sect-exterminating war, he was seriously injured and then sealed in the main hall of the cave residence. All these years, he had been working hard to break the seal. Right after he broke the seal, he encountered Fang Qingshan and the others. He wanted to plot against them, but he did not expect to run into a tough opponent before he could succeed. Then, he was sealed by the sealing talisman. Following that, he was beaten up badly by Fang Qingshan's series of punches. It wasn't easy for him to break free from his shackles and activate his berserk demon mode. But who would have thought that he still wouldn't be able to overcome Fang Qingshan? For a moment, even with the support of the skeleton, the Divine Emperor's body looked extremely thin and illusory, like a shadow that would become blurry when the wind blew. However, he was strong enough. Even at this stage, he was still able to scare Fang Qingshan so much that he did not dare to act rashly. Indeed, even in death, he was still alive. Fortunately, although he had revealed his real body, he was just like Fang Qingshan, strong in appearance, but weak in reality. He could only rely on his imposing manner to scare people. The confrontation lasted for 15 minutes. Just as Fang Qingshan could not hold back anymore and was about to test the waters, the Divine Emperor finally made a move. Fang Qingshan's heart instantly jumped to his throat. The token in his hand was almost soaked in sweat and blood. The wind was howling, and every tree and bush was an enemy. Fang Qingshan was ready to crush the token as soon as he saw that the situation was not good. Fortunately, the situation did not seem to have reached that point. The God Emperor on the other side was originally an evil being, but at this moment, it seemed to be very different. When he closed his eyes and sensed it, it seemed to be no different from an ordinary living being. Maybe it was the final radiance of the setting sun, or maybe the evil chi was burned by the hellfire, or maybe there were other reasons. In any case, the Divine Emperor seemed to have come back to life, and his intelligence was restored. He looked Fang Qingshan up and down and let out a long sigh. I never imagined that the Dao sect would actually have a genius like you. It really is blessed by the heavens. All those years ago, if my Crimson Sky sect had a person like you, why would we have to risk universal condemnation? No one knew if it was because of discord, or that the words of a dying man were kind, but the emperor seemed to be calm as he chatted with Fang Qingshan. However, Fang Qingshan was not in the mood to respond to his sigh. He was still on guard. It was better to be safe than sorry. The divine emperor did not mind this at all, as if he had already expected this situation. He did not care whether Fang Qingshan answered him or not. After sighing to himself, he turned back to look at the cave abode, full of nostalgia and relief. The dead will eventually die. I'm finally free. As soon as he finished speaking, the divine emperor completely turned into a firefly in the summer night and drifted away with the wind. This time, he was completely turned into ashes. Even reincarnation was impossible. However, this was probably the best outcome for him. After all, living in such a half-human, half-demon state was also a kind of torture for him. Now that he had asked for it, he got it. However, although he saw the divine emperor turn into ashes in front of him, Fang Qingshan did not let down his guard. He still maintained a high level of vigilance. After all, this was the divine emperor. Who knew if he was completely dead? If he suddenly escaped and attacked him, wouldn't he feel wronged? After a long time, there was no movement. In addition, there was no warning from the celestial chessboard or the timeless Arkansas. Only then did Fang Qingshan let out a long sigh of relief. Knowing that he had passed this hurdle, his essence, qi, and spirit were exhausted. Fortunately, he did not fall to the ground. This time, it was even more difficult than the last time he went through the immortal tribulation. He was almost at the end of his rope. At this time, any random person in the immortal realm could probably consign him to eternal damnation. At the same time, Fang Qingshan finally understood the gap between himself and the divine emperor. Now, he could not even retreat in one piece, let alone defeat or suppress the divine emperor. After all, this half-dead divine emperor had already exhausted his limited abilities, let alone the other divine emperors who were in good condition. Fang Qingshan had a clear understanding of his combat effectiveness. However, Fang Qingshan believed that as long as he made another breakthrough in his cultivation and the eternal heavenly vessel improved, it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape and scathe like Jiang, Overlord, and the others, even if he couldn't defeat the God Emperors. If the timeless arc could break through the supremacy stage and enter the immortal realm, it might even be possible to suppress the divine emperor. However, if the timeless arc wanted to advance to the immortal realm, the first thing he needed to do was to increase the strength of the timeless arc and fill in the 7 eternal divine furnace units. Fang Qingshan already had a plan to increase the strength of the timeless Arkansas. As for the eternal divine furnace units, Fang Qingshan had already chosen the hibernation pearl, so there were still 6 empty ones. It would depend on the harvest of the cave abode and the reward from the Daoul sect. Senior brother Fang, are you all right? After a long time, Kong Chong and the others came to their senses and hurriedly ran to Fang Qingshan's side and asked with concern. I'm fine. Fang Qingshan shook his head, but he did not relax his grip on the token. One should not have the intention to harm others, but one should always be wary of others. Although he might be gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain, Fang Qingshan was not willing to build his own safety on trusting others. All right, it's harvest season now. Hurry up and take out all the good stuff from the cave abode and then divide the cake. Kong Chong and the others' eyes lit up when they heard this. They could not care about anything else and immediately dispersed. Since the divine emperor had fallen, there was basically no danger in the cave abode anymore. Therefore, everyone quickly swept the entire cave abode clean, and all the harvest was piled in front of Fang Qingshan. Next was to divide the spoils. Although Fang Qingshan wanted to eat the spoils alone, a gentleman should have a proper way of obtaining wealth. This time, it was not just a single person's credit. Forget about the others. This time, he was able to successfully escape and gain something. In addition to his own strength, it was also thanks to Kong Chang's 2 life-saving talismans. Therefore, Fang Qingshan could not take everything for himself. Although he wished he could take everything, he was still a decent person. Therefore, for the sake of fairness, they first collected all the spoils and then divided them according to their contributions. Although the harvest of the divine Emperor Cave Abode was dangerous, the The rewards were naturally proportional to the danger. Chapter 1440. As Kong Chang and the others gathered all the gains from the cave abode in front of Fang Qingshan, Fang Qingshan felt the atmosphere suddenly heat up and everyone's breathing quickened. Some people couldn't help but swallow their saliva. It was no wonder that everyone looked like they had never seen the world before. Even Kong Chang and Fang Qingshan weren't much better. Kong Chang's family was very knowledgeable, and the Kong family was considered a big force even in the Dao sect. He had seen countless good things, but none of them belonged to him. As for Fang Qingshan, he had even seen the everlasting lotus. But so what? Like Kong Chang, he could only look at it from afar. Although he knew that the Divine Emperor Cave Abode would have a lot of gains, he couldn't help but feel excited when he saw all these good things, especially when these things were only a part of the Divine Emperor Cave Abode. One must know that the cave had experienced two great calamities in succession. The first was naturally when the Dao Will sect annihilated the Scarlet Firmament sect. The Divine Emperor died in battle, and the cave abode was damaged. The second time was naturally when Qing Shan and the God Emperor fought in a daze. If he didn't go crazy, he wouldn't survive. The two exchanges could be said to be earth-shattering, especially the last one. The first time the Dao Will sect attacked, it was as overwhelming as the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. The Divine Emperor didn't have much room to resist before he was suppressed. After all, at that time, the Divine Emperor and the four ultimate treasures were the decisive battle power. The peak Divine Emperor was the main battle power. The Divine Emperor was only a mainstay. Therefore, although that battle was tragic, it was only relative to the entire Scarlet Firmament sect. For the Divine Emperor Cave Abode, it didn't suffer much damage. But it was different this time. This time, Fang Qingshan was only an immortal realm expert, and the Divine Emperor was half crippled. It could be said that the two of them were evenly matched, like a general meeting a talented general. In fact, this was the most frightening situation in a battle, because no one could do anything to the other. They couldn't sweep away the enemy in one go, and the battle would fall into a stalemate. Then, the situation would fall into the rhythm of a battle of resources and consumption. It was precisely because of this that the surrounding environment was severely damaged. Because he was fighting with the Divine Emperor earlier, he had no time to pay attention to other things. Now that he saw the damaged treasures, and many of them were even destroyed by the shock waves of the battle, Fang Qingshan's heart was bleeding. After all, he was a person who wouldn't let even a single blade of grass go. However, he couldn't care less at that time. If he couldn't defeat the evil that killed the God Emperor, not to mention being destroyed, even these things wouldn't belong to him. Of course, Fang Qingshan only thought about it for a short while before he tossed it to the back of his mind. The most important thing now was for everyone to share the resources. Fang Qingshan looked at all the resources. Among them, there were 5 that were the best. The first one, which was also the most precious one, was naturally the grade 3 spiritual root, the Lotus of Bliss, which had almost caused Fang Qingshan and the others to fall into eternal damnation. Although it was only an early-stage rank 3 item, its value was above that of a mid-stage rank 3 item. Generally speaking, a spiritual root of the same level was obviously more valuable than a spiritual treasure of the same level. This was because spiritual treasures were basically used to increase one's combat power. On the other hand, a spiritual root was mostly used to assist in cultivation. Take the Desolation of Desolation as an example. Mount Meru and the Heavenly Court relied on the Bodhi tree, the Virtuous Golden Lotus, and the Immortality Peach tree to maintain their status. Whether it was for suppressing providence or nurturing disciples, it was obviously better than ordinary primordial spiritual treasures. Therefore, one could imagine how precious this treasure was. However, this flower already had an owner. Fang Qingshan had long regarded it as his possession. Everyone was well aware of this. Even Kong Chang could only sigh regretfully. The second one was the sword in the God Emperor's hand. Speaking of which, this God Emperor was really a tycoon. If it wasn't for the Crimson Firmament sect's annihilation, with his providence, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break through to the God Emperor stage. After all, not everyone could have a grade 3 spiritual root and a grade 3 supreme treasure. Ordinary God Emperors didn't even have a single one, let alone a few. Many people were still using grade 2 supreme treasures. Yes, this Yi Bing sword was originally a grade 3 supreme treasure. Unfortunately, this God Emperor's luck wasn't on his side. He was born at the wrong time and was destined to face such a calamity. However, it was a pity that the sword was heavily damaged during the sex annihilation. As a result, its grade dropped to half a step into grade 3. However, it was also because of this that Fang Qingshan managed to escape the calamity. Otherwise, a God Emperor who was half crippled was already very difficult to deal with. If he had a grade 3 supreme treasure, the result would be obvious. Fang Qingshan didn't know whether he should feel lucky or regretful. Should he feel lucky that the sword's grade dropped? Regretful that he didn't get a grade 3 supreme treasure? However, thinking about it, he should feel more lucky. After all, if the sword grade was still the same, he wouldn't have the chance to feel regretful. After all, these things didn't belong to him. As for the other 3 items, he obtained them in the palace. One of them was a cultivation method of the deity emperor level. It was a cultivation method of the deity emperor himself. It was unknown whether it was the inherited cultivation method of the Crimson Cloud School, or if he had obtained it by chance, or if he had created it himself like Fang Qingshan. However, no matter which one it was, this technique was extremely precious. It included both Dharma and Tao. In other words, included the fundamental Dharma for Tao cultivation as well as techniques for Tao protection. It was all-inclusive. If one were to exchange for such a technique in the Great Doctrine Palace, the amount of Tao value required would be astronomical. Furthermore, in order to reduce everyone's burden, the Great Doctrine Palace exchanged them separately. They only exchanged for techniques or techniques. Putting everything else aside, just this cultivation technique alone was enough to make this trip worthwhile. After all, this was a foundational technique that could be passed down to a force. To Fang Qingshan, he was going to work hard for the Divine Emperor technique of all heavens. This technique came at the right time. As for the other 2 items, one of them was a banner. This was a Buddhist treasure that was similar to a companion spiritual treasure, the banner of scripture connection. However, its grade was naturally incomparable. All sorts of Buddhist images were engraved around the treasure. There were 7 colored glazes and a dense layer of pearls. There were also mysterious incantations that kept appearing on the banner. Buddhist chants could be faintly heard in the surrounding void. It made one feel majestic, compassionate, limitless light, and limitless lifespan. However, it was a pity that this treasure was a supportive treasure. Unlike the sword in the God Emperor's hand, it wasn't a treasure that specialized in killing or defense. Chapter 1441. This scripture banner was an ancient treasure that the Divine Emperor had obtained along with a lotus of bliss from an unknown Buddhist relic by chance. However, it was a pity that, just like the treasured sword from before, it had fallen in grade. It should be known that this item was originally of the 3rd level as well. However, perhaps due to the ancient catastrophe or some other reason, its grade dropped as well. If it wasn't for the fact that it was with the Lotus of Bliss, a 3rd level spiritual root, and was being nourished by Buddhist energy, it wouldn't have been able to maintain its current grade. Buddhist magic treasures were somewhat different from ordinary magic treasures. Though the Buddhists all looked kind and had the heart of a bodhisattva, they were extremely domineering and didn't cultivate Buddhism. While their treasures couldn't be used, their effects would be greatly reduced. Plus, during the process of using the treasures, the cultivator would be influenced subtly. For example, the cultivator would feel closer to the Buddhists and, in serious cases, convert to Buddhism. This could be seen from the first world. Fang Qingshan went to using the all-heaven chessboard, the Dragon of Sky. Murongbo, Jiumaji, Xiao Yuan Shan, and the others cultivated the 72 techniques of Shaolin but didn't study Buddhism. In the end, they all suffer the consequences. They all became Buddhists. Ignoring all of that, because this treasure's grade dropped and the Divine Emperor had a 3rd level treasure, it wasn't that important anymore. Plus, this treasure wasn't an offensive or defensive treasure, but one that helped in cultivating Buddhism. To the divine emperor of the Red Firmament House, it was tasteless and a waste to throw it away. Therefore, he had no choice but to shelve it. Therefore, this was the drawback of Buddhist treasures. If it fell into the hands of Buddhists, it would be fine. Even if it was damaged, they could use Buddhist energy to nourish it. During the nourishment process, they could improve. However, if it fell into the hands of non-Buddhists, its effectiveness and value would be greatly reduced. If they weren't careful, they could even fall into the hands of Buddhism. Therefore, this treasure was the least valuable out of all the treasures. However, the so-called least valuable was only relative. After all, it was a third-level treasure. If it fell into the hands of a Buddhist monk, it wouldn't be traded for money. The last item was a bottle of medicinal pellets. At first glance, the pill inside looked like a ginseng fruit. It was like a real living being, a pill that could assist a god emperor in his cultivation. Although it was a consumable item, its grade was still there. In terms of value, it was still above the treasured sword scripture banner that had fallen in grade. In the end, there were pitifully few elixirs that could help primordial chaos and immortal cultivators, let alone god emperors. Among the desolation techniques, the most powerful 9 transformations golden pill was only slightly useful for those below the grand heavenly realm. For those above the grand heavenly realm, other than top-grade numinous treasures and above, they could only rely on their own meditation and hard work. Of course, that was only in the desolation realm. It might be better in the myriad heavens and realms, but it was not much better, especially when it came to the cultivation of divine emperors. Even the Dao school did not have many auxiliary methods. It was likely that the deity emperor used everything he had to make it in order to speed up his cultivation. Unfortunately, before he could go into seclusion to digest what he had learned, he encountered the calamity of extermination. As a result, he bitterly regretted sacrificing his golden thread for others. And in the end, Fang Qingshan and his enemies took advantage of it. She wondered if he would jump out of his coffin when he recalled these things. However, this was just a casual remark. After all, the deity emperor was turned into ashes, and his soul was dispersed. Not even a trace of him was left. As for the other miscellaneous items, there were even more. Although many of the treasures could not be compared to the 5 items above, there were still quite a number of second-grade treasures. Among them, there were spiritual roots, elixirs, materials, and cultivation techniques. It could be said to be all-encompassing. After everyone gathered, they looked at the treasures in front of them greedily. However, apart from Kong Chong and Fang Qingshan, the others knew their limits. They knew that the 5 treasures in the middle were not something they could covet. After all, they didn't contribute much and only followed along to get some leftovers. It was all thanks to Fang Qingshan and Kong Chong that they were able to keep their lives. Otherwise, not to mention getting a share, they wouldn't even be able to keep their lives. Moreover, even if there were greedy people who had wishful thinking, they had to see if it was realistic. Compared to Fang Qingshan and Kong Chong, they really did not have much of competitive edge. Even if Fang Qingshan looked like he would be blown away by the wind, they could only secretly think of some unrealistic ideas. Because even if they killed Fang Qingshan, they would not be able to get anything out of it. They would definitely lose their lives, and they might not even be able to kill Fang Qingshan. After all, they had seen the previous exchange. The tiger's ferocity was still there, and they did not dare to take the risk of stroking Fang Qingshan's tiger whiskers. If it didn't court death, they might still have some gains. If they overestimated their own capabilities and didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, forget about the gains, they might even lose their lives. Those who could cultivate to the immortal realm were obviously not fools. They all knew how to restrain themselves. Hence, after they swept their gazes over the other second-level treasures, they looked at Fang Qingshan in unison, waiting for him to distribute. However, towards their expectations, Fang Qingshan and Kong Chong turned a blind eye. The most important thing now was to distribute the gains between the two of them. This time, although the main force was Fang Qingshan, Kong Chong was also an indispensable help. Not to mention that this cave abode was found by him. Even the 2 talismans from before also contributed greatly. Hence, what Fang Qingshan had to consider now was how much was suitable to give to Kong Chong. As for Kong Chong, he did not speak and only quietly waited for Fang Qingshan's decision. It was better to stay still than to move. Silence was golden. Given his contributions and background, Fang Qingshan would not mistreat him. It was indeed as Kong Chong thought. Fang Qingshan thought about it and made up his mind. Let's distribute according to our contributions. Fang Qingshan looked straight at Kong Chong and said in a deep voice, "This time, it's all thanks to Junior Brother leading the way that we were able to find this divine Emperor cave abode. In addition, Junior Brother used 2 life-saving talismans." After a pause, Fang Qingshan continued, "Among these 5 items, let's not talk about cultivation techniques. We'll each make a copy of it. Excluding the Lotus of Bliss, you can take any 2 of the remaining 3 treasures." Fang Qingshan said after some thought. Fang Qingshan was a fair person. Although he loved money and killed, he was generous to his own people. At least, he would not deliberately take advantage of them. If it was his own, he would not give it up. If it was someone else's, he would not touch it. At the same time, Fang Qingshan also considered the Kong family behind Kong Chong. If he wanted to stay in the Dao Will sect in the future, it was necessary for him to befriend these powerful local tyrants before he had absolute strength. Moreover, he did not lose out. Just the 3rd-level spiritual root, the Lotus of Bliss, was already considered a bountiful harvest. Chapter 1442. With regards to Fang Qingshan's decision, Kong Chong secretly heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, his eyes were full of surprise. As for the others, they were naturally envious. Don't be fooled by his previous calm expression. Actually, he was a little nervous. After all, money could move people's hearts. Who knew how Fang Qingshan would choose? However, he knew that silence spoke louder than words. If Fang Qingshan was willing to uphold fairness, it didn't matter if he spoke or not. If he was really blinded by the things in front of him, Kong Chong had no other choice. After all, although he played a role, he still relied on Fang Qingshan to be able to gain something. However, even so, if Fang Qingshan really took some things to get rid of him, Kong Chong would no longer regard Fang Qingshan as his greatest opponent in his anger. Because a person who couldn't control his own heart couldn't possibly go far. The worst outcome didn't happen. At this moment, Kong Chong sincerely admired Fang Qingshan's generosity. Facing these things, although he wouldn't eat it alone, he couldn't be as carefree as Fang Qingshan. If it were him, he would at most get 1 treasure, and it would be the weakest treasure banner given to others. If he wanted to be like Fang Qingshan and get almost half, that was simply a fool's talk. But he didn't expect that not only did Fang Qingshan allow him to copy the cultivation technique, but he could also choose among the treasures. Although he excluded the level 3 spiritual root, the Lotus of Bliss, it was already very good. If Fang Qingshan was still willing to share the Lotus of Bliss, not only would Kong Chong not be secretly impressed and grateful, but he would also be suspicious and suspect if Fang Qingshan was plotting something. He might even call Fang Qingshan an idiot. "Thank you, Senior Brother. Then, I won't stand on ceremony. I'll take the elixir and the sword." Kong Chong first expressed his gratitude to Fang Qingshan. Then, almost without any hesitation, he chose the sword and the elixir. He chose the sword because it was considered the most valuable of the 5 treasures apart from the Lotus of Bliss. Among the 5 treasures, according to their value, the Lotus of Bliss would definitely be ranked first. This was without a doubt, followed by the treasured sword, followed by the elixir, followed by the cultivation technique, and lastly, the scripture banner. The Lotus of Bliss and the treasured sword did not need to be mentioned. The reason why cultivation methods were only ranked before the scripture banner was because to Fang Qingshan and the others, this item was not necessary. In the Dao Will sect in the Dao Palace, although there were not as many God Emperor level cultivation techniques as there were primordial chaos and immortal realm cultivation techniques, there were still hundreds of them. However, in order to obtain these cultivation techniques, one had to pay a certain price. Not everyone was like Fangqing Shan, who needed to be well-read. For many powers, as long as they had a divine art, they would be able to pass it down in an orderly manner. Therefore, it was fine if the divine emperor's cultivation method fell into the hands of Fangqing Shan, but in the hands of Kong Chong, its value was not that great. However, if it was placed in the outside world, the situation would be very different. Especially for many small forces, they would not exchange it for a level 3 supreme treasure. This was because with this cultivation method, they could continuously cultivate divine emperors. If they only had a level 3 supreme treasure without the corresponding strength, it would be a disaster instead of a blessing. Moreover, although the treasured sword's grade had dropped, it was not impossible to repair, especially with the Dao Will Sex sword tomb. Repairing this item was only a matter of time. When that time came, the Kong family would have another level 3 supreme treasure to guard. This would be of great help to the improvement of the entire family's strength. It was even possible that this supreme treasure would be given to Kong Chong after it was repaired. After all, he was the face of the Kong family this time. In this way, he would have a level 3 supreme treasure before becoming a divine emperor. Even in the Dao Will sect, many divine emperors would be envious of him. As for the elixir, although it had no effect on peak divine emperors, it would be greatly beneficial to early divine emperors, middle divine emperors, and even late divine emperors. It would at least shorten their lifespan by nearly 1,000,000 years. Especially for early divine emperors, it would have the effect of breaking through barriers. The value of the elixir that was effective on divine emperors was above that of ordinary level 3 supreme treasures. Although it was a consumable, level 3 spiritual treasures increased one's combat power, while elixirs increased one's cultivation base. Dao was the foundation, and strength was the end. The great Dao was the foundation. Blindly believing in strength and superstition would probably be a disaster. If there were only treasured swords and elixirs, Kong Chong would only choose the elixir and not the treasured sword. After all, the Kong family did have level 3 supreme treasures, but elixirs that could improve one's cultivation base were really rare. With strength, one would naturally be able to obtain treasures relatively easily. Without strength, even if one obtained treasures, one would still tremble with fear and tread on thin ice. If one was not careful, one would be doomed eternally. However, Fangqing Shan was not very concerned about this. After all, the most precious lotus of bliss was already in his possession. It was a level 3 supreme treasure, and it was the first level 3 treasure that Fangqing Shan had obtained. In the past, he had only seen the creation green lotus, the heaven-splitting axe, and the creation jade plate in his primordial spirit imprint. Even Yang may had the chaos bead. Now he finally had a level 3 treasure that belonged to him. Moreover, the Lotus of Bliss was not as simple as a level 3 supreme treasure. It was very important for Fangqing Shan to perfect the Great Dao Green Lotus visualization diagram. If the Great Dao Green Lotus visualization diagram was perfected, it could also speed up Fangqing Shan's cultivation. There was also another point, and that was the advancement of the Timeless Arc in Sa. The Timeless Arc had already reached the honorable level, and the next step was to break through to the immortal level. However, the advancement of the Timeless Arc was already very resource-intensive. In addition, Fangqing Shan's Timeless Arc was mutated, and it would be even more difficult to break through. Now, the Eternal Divine Furnace unit needed to be at least a level 2 supreme treasure, and it had to be a special one, such as the Hibernation Pearl. This was the Divine Furnace unit, and the most important thing was the Timeless Arc itself. In the past, Fangqing Shan had integrated the Chaos Demonic God's Corpse, the Virtuous Golden Lotus, and the power of will to upgrade the Timeless Arc in Sa. However, as the Timeless Arc's grade increased, the advancement speed could not keep up. The Divine Furnace unit could be integrated with higher-grade supreme treasures, but could the body be replaced? Although the Timeless Arc could be upgraded with the power of will, the Eternal Blessing could be improved. But for Fang Qingshan, it was too slow. Today, Fang Qingshan's cultivation had already reached the peak of the late-stage immortal level, while the timeless arc had just broken through to the honorable level. It could not keep up with Fang Qingshan's advancement speed. Therefore, he needed to speed up the timeless arc's advancement speed. At the very least, he had to advance to the immortal level before he broke through to the God Emperor level. Otherwise, the God Emperor tribulation would be a huge obstacle. However, if he had the Lotus of Bliss, things would be different. If he could integrate this treasure into the timeless arc's body, as long as the eternal divine furnace unit was filled, the timeless arc's advancement to the immortal level was almost a matter of course. Chapter 1443. The Lotus of Bliss was compatible with the Golden Lotus of Merit. Its defense was amazing, and it was the best way to improve one's body. As for the other treasures he obtained, they were not bad either. The Scripture Banner had the foundation of a Level 3 Supreme Treasure. Although it was the weakest among the Level 3 Supreme Treasures, it was still at least 30% inferior, right? Even if Fang Qingshan did not repair it, he could give it to Mosquito Dowren to devour. It would be enough to make up for it. Of course, this was only because of Fang Qingshan. If the Buddhists, or even non-Buddhists, knew that he was wasting such a precious treasure, they would definitely attack him. Even if the Scripture Banner was not an offensive or defensive treasure, it still had the foundation of a Level 3 Supreme Treasure. Even if he did not need it, he could still exchange it. Unfortunately, this was something that they did not know. In fact, even if they knew, they would probably do the same if they were in Fang Qingshan's situation. After all, Mosquito Dowren's talent was truly unprecedented. Exchanging a spirit treasure that was not of much use for a rapid advancement in cultivation was something that anyone would be willing to do. There was also the cultivation technique of the God Emperor. This was also a gain that could not be ignored for Fang Qingshan, although it was only ranked 4th in value, just before the Scripture Banner. That was only for Fang Qingshan and Fang Qingshan. Moreover, because Fang Qingshan had created his own cultivation technique, he needed to read a lot of books. However, this did not mean that the scripture was useless. After all, his cultivation had already reached the peak of the late-stage immortal realm. The God Emperor realm was in sight. What he needed to do next was to improve his cultivation, the cultivation of his clone, and the grade of the timeless Arkansas. The most important thing was to perfect the God Emperor chapter of the All Heavens Tao verification technique. Because of the Myriad Worlds technique, it was much easier for Fang Qingshan to perfect the God Emperor chapter. He only needed to adapt it according to the framework of the Myriad Worlds technique and make it suitable for himself. However, the most important thing was to read a lot of books to make up for his shortcomings. Therefore, he needed a lot of God Emperor cultivation techniques for his reference. Even the Dao sect did not dare to say that there were too many Divine Emperor level cultivation techniques, so having one more was a pleasant surprise. Moreover, the techniques in the Dao sect were not free. After the Divine Emperor's cave abode, Fang Qingshan and the others stopped fighting. They could only watch the Crimson Heaven Realm explode. It wasn't that they didn't want to continue plundering, but they didn't have the strength to do so. Fang Qingshan and the Timeless Ark had suffered unprecedented damage. Even though they had obtained a lot of good stuff, it would still take time for them to recover. Without Kong Chang's trump card, even if Fang Qingshan was at his peak, he wouldn't have any confidence in his heart. After all, he had already tested the gap between him and the Divine Emperor, and he was indeed not someone he could deal with now. If he was not careful, he might be consigned to eternal damnation. Therefore, in the following days, they stayed in a secluded place and recuperated while waiting for the trial to end. As for why they didn't just pinch the token and teleport out, they thought that if they recovered from their injuries, they could continue to harvest resources. Even if they didn't go to the Divine Emperor's cave abode, resources from other ordinary places were rare in the outside world. Moreover, once they went out, their results would be fixed. If they didn't make it to the top 100, it would be terrible. At least they still had a chance to deal with them inside, right? 1 month later, in the Crimson Heaven Realm, Fang Shan stood with his hands behind his back, looking at everything around him with nostalgia. He was reluctant to leave and even had the urge to stay. After all, the harvest of this short 1 month, excluding the level 3 spiritual root, the lotus of bliss, and other treasures, just the level 2 treasures had far surpassed the previous time when Mosquito Dowrin and the others swept through the dangerous places. In fact, this was normal. After all, what was the cultivation of Mosquito Dowrin and the others last time, and what level of dangerous places they swept through? What was their current cultivation, and what kind of place was the Crimson Heaven Realm? The harvest naturally couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. Behind Fang Shan were Kong Chong, Wang Run, and the others. At this moment, their expressions were almost the same as his. Not only him, they also wanted to stay in the Crimson Heaven Realm. If they could stay in the Crimson Heaven Realm, perhaps the probability of ordinary disciples breaking through to the Divine Emperor Realm would increase by more than 30%. As for Fang Shan, Kong Chong, and the others, their time would be shortened by a lot. Unfortunately, this was just a thought. Not only them, but many divine emperors also wanted to stay in the Crimson Heaven Realm. But could they really do it? The sect obviously wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. If it weren't for the coincidence this time, how could they stay in the Crimson Heaven Realm? They couldn't even get in. Regardless of what Fang Shan and the others thought, when the time was up, the blue dome split open, the clouds collapsed, and a vast force descended, filling the space. In the next moment, the protective token in their hands shattered, turning into a guiding immortal light that shrouded them and shot straight into the sky. Not long after, Fang Shan and the others felt the world spin, as if time and space were distorted. When they opened their eyes again, they had already returned to the Tao chaotic world. The vigorous Crimson Heaven Realm trial had come to an end. Because of the waves that Fang Shan had stirred up, in the end, he still came out on top. The others had some gains, and some had failures. But no matter what, the Tao schools seemed to be thriving. At least they dared to compete with the Divine Emperor. Just this kind of attitude was enough to make people sigh with emotion. On the star, auspicious light and auspicious aura lingered, and the sound of the bell was clear and melodious. Elder Zhuge looked at the disciples who were teleported out of the Crimson Heaven Realm with satisfaction. This group of people was originally the best in the past, and it could be said that they were the embodiment of the Tao while sex accumulated luck. More importantly, with Fang Shan as the target and leader, the other disciples were stimulated and turned the pressure into motivation, constantly developing their potential. Because Fang Shan had challenged the Divine Emperor's cave abode, almost 10 Divine Emperor's cave abodes have been challenged in the Crimson Heaven Realm. No matter what the final result was, whether they gained something or were repelled, or some other situation, they had already won since they were able to face the Divine Emperor head-on. This was because this gain could not be exchanged for any amount of resources. Zhuge Jin's jade-white hand gently lifted up, and the star catalog floating above the Crimson Heaven Realm immediately fell into her hand. Then, with a push, a rumbling sound erupted again, and the Crimson Heaven Realm once again escaped into the fault of time and space, waiting for the next opening. Whoosh! Zhuge Jin gently shook the catalog in her hand, and in an instant, the 100 brightest stars immediately turned into streams of light and landed on Fang Shan and the others at lightning speed. Needless to say, these people were obviously the top 100 in the Crimson Heaven Realm trial. Swish, 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 swish. As the starlight shone on their bodies, it was as if luck had descended upon them. One by one, the Tao sect disciples who had successfully passed the trial could not help but release their aura. Chapter 1444. This time, Fang Shan was certain to make into the top 100. After all, he had obtained a level 3 spirit root. If he still couldn't make into the top 100, there was definitely something fishy going on. There were the original top 10 intersect disciples, some dark horses like Fang Shan, and disciples with deep foundations like Kong Chong, who were second only to the top 10 intersect disciples. These people were extraordinarily talented and imposing. Although they weren't the mainstay of the Dao sect, they were the future of the Dao sect. As long as they advanced to God Emperor, they would definitely open up a new world for the Dao sect. Providence was something that complemented each other. Their existence supported the Dao sect's providence and longevity. Naturally, the Dao sect providence would also be added to them, allowing them to grow more smoothly and go further. Therefore, as soon as these people passed the Crimson Heaven Realm trial, the Dao sect's providence favored them immediately. All of them couldn't help but release their aura. However, there were disciples from rich families like Kong Chong, who were from big clans and were covered in jewelry. Jingle, jingle, jingle. The sounds of jewelry collided, and every sound was like the sound of gold and jade. Listening to it, it gave people a sense of luxury and grace. There were also people like Fong Shan, who lived like a wild crane, unrestrained and free. Their great power belonged to themselves. Rumble. With a single thought, without showing his spirit treasure or the timeless arc, his power alone was enough to attract the attention of everyone present. His will to compete with Heaven Duke, his vast dermic power, and his pure nomological domain seemed to form his own heaven and earth as he stood there. The acupoints all over his body shone brightly, swallowing and spitting out spiritual power. God sat in each acupoint, chanting mantras and expounding the truth. Compared to Fong Shan, Kong Chong, and the others were naturally a notch lower. However, just because they were weaker than Fong Shan didn't mean that there was no one else. Since Fong Shan hadn't unleashed his full power on the eternal heavenly vessel, the other disciples wouldn't back down. They wouldn't let Fong Shan take the lead. A long whistle was heard, and a rainbow bridge stretched across the sky, crisscrossing in all directions, crossing the 9 heavens and 10 earths. On it was a golden-robed young man, his head held high, his eyes clear and bright, looking around in high spirits. The rainbow bridge was none other than the amalgamation of the Tao insight that he cultivated. If Fong Shan didn't reveal his Dharma treasure, they naturally wouldn't take advantage of him. However, even this rainbow bridge was still shocking, because the rainbow bridge was formed from 81 Tao insights. Even though he could not be compared to the Tao sect leader's 1,000 Tao wills, what was the sect leader's cultivation level, and what was his cultivation level? This person was none other than the former #1 person in the Tao sect's inner court, Pang Bo. The golden rainbow streaked across the sky with a majestic aura. It wasn't just him. Beside him, there was a young man who was majestic like Feng Su riding the wind, floating in the air as if he was aloof from the world and had ascended to immortality. Standing in the void, he was dressed in a simple white robe. He seemed to be far away, but was actually close, giving people a feeling of being in a trance. At first glance, he seemed to have a kind of indifference that kept people away. This person was the former #3 disciple in the Tao sect's inner court, Li Mu Bai. He didn't seem to be as domineering as Pang Bo, but he didn't make any movements. He just stood there quietly, attracting everyone's attention. His celestial appearance was outstanding, and he was the center of attention. Looking to the side, there were 2 young girls, but they were like orchids and chrysanthemums, each with their own merits. One had a high bun, slender eyebrows. Her red lips were bright, her white teeth were fresh, her bright eyes were kind, and her dimples were powerful. She was elegant and graceful, and her body was calm. One wore a white robe that fluttered in the wind. She was barefooted, had black eyes, and had long hair. Every frown and smile of hers was mesmerizing and charming. These 2 were the 7th and 8th disciples in the Tao sect's inner court, Ling Bo and Bu Yanran. One was water, and one was fire, one was cold, and one was hot. One was an orchid in an empty valley, and the other was a red spider lily. They were the Tao sect's inner court's twin beauties. Although the others were also handsome, they seemed to be overshadowed in front of the 2 of them. These people were originally famous figures in the Tao sect. On the other side, there was a dark horse that suddenly rose up like Fong Shan. One of them was a swordsman. The sword energy was chilling. The sword energy swept across 30,000 miles, and the sword light froze 19 continents. The sword energy rushed into the sky, splitting the void. It wasn't intense, high, or ferocious, but it rose up like a Kuan Pung, swallowing the heavens and earth. This person's sword energy was somewhat similar to the sword energy of Fang Qingshan's death scythe. Before the sword light, there was no way to survive. It was unparalleled in killing and took away life. At this moment, the entire world seemed to be shrouded by the murderous intent of the sword light. This person was called Yin Sha. He had white eyebrows, white eyes, and white clothes. He was as skinny as a stick and looked like he was in dire straits. However, no one dared to underestimate him, because those who underestimated him had almost all died under his thin willow sword. Apart from him, there was also an elder that made Fang Qingshan look sideways. This person looked ordinary, but upon closer inspection, one would feel that he was filled with dignity and righteousness. At first glance, one would either be intimidated or filled with respect. He had studied intensively and lived for a long time. Facing him was like facing the Tao Palace and facing the principles. This person was called Zhang Xian. He was a little different from Yin Sha. Although they were both dark horses, one of them was unconventional, while the other was upright. This person was truly a person who had studied intensively and had accumulated a lot of knowledge. Like Fang Qingshan, he had seen everything that could be seen in the Tao Palace and had his own understanding. Although he was indeed a little older, Fang Qingshan did not dare to underestimate him at all. Apart from them, the others were naturally also dragons and phoenixes of their time. They were like heaven and earth, with a myriad of phenomena. For a moment, flowers fell from the sky, golden lotuses rose from the ground, rainbow bridges flew across the sky, flood dragons danced in the sky, auspicious lights surrounded by five-colored glazed light, and mysterious sounds lingered. All of them had different expressions and expressions. Some of them had long sleeves fluttering in the wind. Some of them were handsome. Some of them were dressed in bright red clothes. Some of them were looking down on the world with their hand behind their back. Some of them were walking forward in high spirits, full of energy. There were many different kinds of people. What a Dao sect. It looks like they are really going to rise again. This is truly spectacular. On the viewing platform, the people from the Freedom Sect, Fluttering Snow Palace, Jiwu Sect, and other sects looked at the beautiful picture in midair. Everyone's expressions were solemn. It was either the east wind suppressing the west wind, or the west wind suppressing the east wind. Although the universe was vast, after such a long time, the division of resources had almost been fixed. The rise of one party would definitely encroach on the interests of the other party. Although the three sects were not close to the Tao sect, they were relatively the closest major forces. The rise of the Tao sect would definitely have an impact on them. Therefore, it was no wonder that they looked solemn. At this moment, they were thinking about how to deal with the rise of the Tao sect. Fortunately, the Tao sect did not have a new god emperor. Otherwise, they would not be able to sit still. Chapter 1445. As the saying goes, a centipede dies but does not stiffen. It rises and falls, hibernates, and takes advantage of the situation to rise. The people from the Freedom Sect were speechless for a long time. Comparing the atmosphere of their own sect with that of their disciples, they realized that the quality of the disciples and the atmosphere in the sect were slightly inferior. However, the disciples in their sect were completely different. The disciples that were brought by them were obviously geniuses. After seeing the performance of Fang Qingshan and the others, although they were shocked at first, they were soon filled with an unyielding aura. Teacher, there's no need to be pessimistic. They are powerful, but we might not be any worse. Lang Qianli and the others comforted the elders of their sections. Their voices were filled with solemnity and confidence. Seeing this scene, the elders were a little relieved. Although the rise of the Tao sect had given them pressure, they had finally achieved their goal this time. Compared to the solemnity of the other sects, The people from the Tao will sect were naturally in a completely different situation. The higher-ups of the Tao will sect were grinning from ear to ear. This was not just because there were many geniuses in the Tao will sect, but because they were the actual controllers of the Tao will sect and could feel the changes in the providence of the Tao will sect the best. With the rise of Fang Qingshan's group, the Tao will sect's luck seemed to have bounced back from the bottom. With a loud bang, it shot up a lot. Although it was not comparable to when the Tao will sect was at its peak, it was not enough to support the emergence of another emperor god in the Tao will sect. However, this was already a good start, wasn't it? As long as Fang Qingshan and the others grew up, the next batch of disciples would not have to maintain this standard. As long as it did not drop too much, as long as the Tao will sect continued to develop, it would only be a matter of time before it returned to its heyday. Yes, as long as the Tao will sect steadily walked forward step by step, restoring its past glory would no longer be an illusion. After all, a mere Fang Qingshan and the timeless arc were enough to fill the Tao will sect with confidence. The reason why he didn't have the power to support Fang Qingshan to make a breakthrough to Emperor God was because it wasn't necessary yet. At the end of the day, the Tao will sect was also a union of interests. Everyone knew that Fang Qingshan and Timeless Arc's breakthroughs were good for everyone. Although the Tao will sect was very united, everyone had their own selfish desires. Therefore, no one would have such thoughts unless they were in a critical situation. Moreover, it did not mean that there was a way. The Scarlet Heaven Gate also had a way, but in the end, not only did they fail to produce a god emperor, they even caused the entire sect to be annihilated. Not only would misfortune arise if one's virtue was not compatible with one's position, but if one's luck was insufficient, there would also be great risks if one tried to force it. The disciples of the Tao will sect naturally did not know what the higher-ups of the Tao will sect were thinking. However, they were also excited, happy, and elated. When they looked at each other, they could see the fanaticism in each other's eyes. In the end, they were in the same boat. They were bound together for good or bad. Only when a sect was prosperous and there were many geniuses would they be able to enjoy the shade under the big tree and go further. It was not that there was no jealousy, but there were very few evil people in the Tao will sect. Even if they were jealous, they would turn their jealousy into strength and think about how to surpass them in the future. After they had vented their feelings, on the star, Elder Zhuge, who was in charge of the situation, picked up the jade puppet and gently rang the bronze bell. In an instant, the entire place quieted down. After explaining the rules of the arena battle in a moderate pace, he opened his mouth and said, "You may begin." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhuge took out an ancient seal. He channeled his magic power and pressed it towards the void. In an instant, 10 arenas appeared. They were completely golden and had interwoven inscriptions. There was nothing else, but the first impression they gave people was that they were sturdy. People in the immortal realm could do whatever they wanted without worrying about the arenas being destroyed. However, that was in the past. The disciples of this batch had already displayed combat power that surpassed the immortal realm in the Crimson Heaven realm. Therefore, just in case, Elder Zhuge even added a layer of restriction on the arena to prevent accidents. As Zhuge announced the start of the challenge, thousands of eyes fell on the top 100 disciples who had passed the trial of the Crimson Heaven realm. Everyone was silent, waiting for the show to begin. There were 10 arenas in total, corresponding to the top 10 of the Inner Sanctum. There were 10 arenas, and each arena had a champion. In order to protect the champion, one had to go through 10 battles or persevere until no one challenged him. If they succeeded, they would be in the top 10 of the Inner Sanctum. If they failed, they would naturally have no hope. The problem now was that the first to become the champion might become the target of everyone. If they were not confident in themselves, they might not be able to make it to the top 10, even if they had the strength to fight continuously, or if they were unlucky. Therefore, the 100 people looked at each other and did not move immediately. The crowd did not rush them. After a while, the first person walked out. "If everyone is not moving, I will start first." With a hearty laugh, a young man jumped up and landed on one of the arenas. This person was none other than a dark horse. His name was Wu Fa. It was said that he had accidentally found a cave dwelling of an ancestor, and his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Once Wu Fa moved, it was like a domino effect. In the next moment, several figures flew out at the same time. In an instant, the entire arena was filled. Among them were the original top 10 disciples, dark horses, and of course, Fang Qingshan. After the 10 people stood still, the remaining 90 people began to divide into groups of 2 or 3 and walk to their respective arenas. Among them, there's a strange phenomenon in front of the arena where Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo, the original number 1 of the inner sanctum, were standing. There was no one there. There was not a single person. In front of the other arenas, there were dozens of people and as few as a few people. Obviously, at this moment, no one was willing to provoke Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo. It was not that the 2 of them were invincible, but because everyone knew that they were not to be trifled with. Although Fang Qingshan was a rising star, those who had seen him go through the tribulation would not look down on him. And Pang Bo was able to sit firmly in the first place of the inner sanctum for many years, suppressing Li Mubai and the others. How could he be simple? The 2 of them were almost certain to enter the top 10. At this moment, they were only choosing the top 10 of the inner sanctum, not fighting for the top 10. Therefore, no one wanted to waste this quota on them. Of course, if everyone fought together, it might not be impossible to pull the 2 of them down. But this obviously did not make up for the loss, and others would benefit for nothing. There was no hurry to fight with the 2 of them. It would not be too late to come back after obtaining the qualification to enter the top 10. The most important thing now was to obtain the top 10 places and ensure that they could enter the true teachings. Moreover, the rewards for the top 10 and those who were not in the top 10 were very different. Everyone was rational and would not do useless things for the sake of pride. Chapter 1446. After all the 10 arenas had a ringmaster, the next step was to defend the arenas. To defend the arenas, one could be like Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo. No one would challenge them until the top 10 disciples were selected. It could also be to successfully deal with the continuous battles. After 10 rounds, one would automatically become one of the top 10 disciples. The former obviously required an absolute advantage. Otherwise, if one was slightly weaker, others could pull them down, or at least not so easily. Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo obviously had such strength, so there was no one in front of their arenas. Instead, Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo looked at each other and saw the strong fighting spirit in each other's eyes. Based on the current situation, it was a matter of course that the 2 of them would enter the top 10 disciples. Moreover, they were the best candidates to compete for the top 3 inner disciples. In the following ranking matches, the other party would definitely be their strongest opponent. In fact, their final opponent would be the other party. One had long been famous, while the other had soared to the sky and was very strong. One wanted to maintain his strength and identity as the number 1, while the other wanted to challenge his limits and break the cage. They were born to fight. As for the others, it was not that they could not compete, but they were still a little weaker than the 2 of them. First, it was hard to say how much fighting strength they would have left after dealing with the continuous battles. Of course, it was also possible to pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger, but it was very rare. Second, it was to know yourself and know your enemy to win every battle. The others might expose their own skills, so they could deal with them with targeted attacks. Therefore, in the following ranking matches, they would be each other's biggest opponents. Therefore, the 2 of them looked at each other, and the fighting spirit in their eyes burned fiercely. No one saw the eye contact between Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo. At this moment, everyone's attention was attracted by the situation in the other 8 arenas. They were looking forward to whether the other 8 could defend the arenas, and who would be the first to attack the arena. Before the crowd could make any more guesses, 8 people walked out. They stood in front of their respective arenas. I am Shui Yunjian. I challenge Senior Zheng Xian. I am Jiang Qingyue. I challenge Senior Bu Yanran. I am Wu Duzuan. I challenge Junior Feng Long. I am Li Zhan. I challenge Senior Nian. I am Lingbo. I challenge Junior Jiayu. I am Cloudy Sky. and I challenge senior brother Wu Fa. I, Morong Hai, challenge senior brother Shang Wanjin. I am Wan Sanxian, and I challenge senior brother Li Mubai. The first wave of people who came up were either those who had absolute confidence in their own strength and were able to suppress the ring master, or those who knew that they weren't that competitive and wanted to participate. Among them, Ling Bo and Wu Duzuan had absolute confidence in their own strength. After all, they were originally ranked 7th and 9th among the top 10 inner court disciples. Although their opponents, Jia Yu and Wind Dragon, were not bad, they were not dark horses. Their previous rankings were far behind them. Therefore, there was almost no suspense in their challenge. There was another person like them, Shui Yunjian. Even though he wasn't one of the top 10 inner disciples, he was still ranked 11th. He had absolute confidence in his own strength. Unfortunately, he had made an error of judgment this time. He had brought up an iron plate. Zheng Xian was not someone he could compare to. After all, even Fang Qingshan could feel the pressure from him. This person's strength was at least in the top 5. As for the others, they were purely here to make their presence known and gain some experience in fighting against experts. Therefore, the current situation was that Jia Yu and Wind Dragon's ring was the fastest to end. Their faces twitched as they watched Ling Bo and Wu Duzuan walk onto the ring. Their eyelids twitched unconsciously. After a while, they smiled bitterly and shook their heads. I'm not a match for senior sister Ling Bo and senior brother Wu Duzuan. I admit defeat. After that, the two of them were too ashamed to stay on the ring and walked straight down. From afar, their bodies were thin and their backs were long. There was a faint sense of desolation and loneliness. The two of them didn't expect their luck to be so bad. They were targeted by people like Ling Bo and Wu Duzuan right from the start. If they had fought 7 or 8 rounds, they might have given it their all when facing the two of them. But now, they had no choice but to retreat. After all, everyone in the sect knew each other. Even though they had a trump card, did the others not have one? Even if they were confident that their trump card was a trump card, what about the later rounds? They didn't want to be the vanguard. Therefore, after seeing Ling Bo and Wu Duzuan, the two of them simply gave up. However, they didn't believe that the two of them would be able to hold on forever. The two of them held their breaths and waited in front of the ring. They wanted to avenge their humiliation, even though they might be taking advantage of others. Wasn't this the essence of a ring battle? Apart from them, there wasn't much else to watch. After all, Bu Yanran, Li Mubai, and Shang Wanjin were the original top 10 inner sect disciples. Wu Fa, Zheng Xian, and Nie Yun were dark horses. As for the others, apart from Shui Yunjian, they were all ranked at the bottom. Therefore, apart from the battle between Shui Yunjian and Zheng Xian, there wasn't much to watch. On the ring, after the two of them bowed, Shui Yunjian said to Zheng Xian, Senior brother Zheng, you're so old. Senior brother Zheng, you're already so old. You'd better hurry up and improve your cultivation. Don't come and compete with us youngsters. Haha, I'm an old steed with great ambition. It's good if you have the ability to kick me off. Zheng Xian replied in a neutral tone. If that's the case, then I'll have to offend you. Shui Yunjian originally thought that he would be like Ling Bo and Wu Duzuan. The moment he stepped onto the ring, the defenders would feel ashamed of their inferiority and be forced off. However, he didn't expect to meet a stubborn old man. His expression turned cold. He took a step forward and released his aura. In an instant, wind blew from all directions. One could even faintly feel layers of ripples forming in the void. Even through the ring, the disciples below could feel waves of pressure. What a great move by Shui Yunjian. What exquisite skills. The crowd below the ring, especially the original top 10 inner sect disciples, couldn't help but look over. Such a boundless amount of magic power made them sigh. Looks like he wasn't hiding his strength in the past. His strength has improved greatly again. Yeah, the sect is indeed full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. He can't be underestimated. Looks like this match is in the bag. That's not necessarily true. Zheng Xian isn't that simple. Oh, while the disciples below were discussing, Zheng Xian also released his aura. His back was ramrod straight like Mount Bujo. It was as if nothing in the world could make him bend his back. His actions were upright, and he sat upright without worry or fear. Chapter 1447. When the heavens are vigorous, a gentleman will strive to improve himself. When the earth is vast, a gentleman will be virtuous. A surge of noble spirit suddenly burst out and instantly collided with Shui Yunjian's imposing manner. Boom! When the two auras clashed, the commotion was even louder than that of the other arenas. In an instant, it drowned out all other sounds. It was as if this was the only sound left in the world. Shui Yunjian's expression immediately changed. He had not expected Zhang Xian to be so powerful. As mentioned earlier, Zhang Xian looked rather old. This wasn't just in terms of his appearance, but his actual age was indeed rather old. He was not from the same batch as Pang Bo and the others, but from the previous batch. As for the disciples of the same batch as him, they had either become true disciples or had changed professions, becoming attendants or protectors. Only Zhang Xian had his heart and soul buried in the Dao Palace, studying scriptures day and night. It was only recently that he had made a breakthrough. However, no one, especially Shui Yunjian and the others, thought that he was a strong opponent. After all, whether it was the previous batch or the current one, Zhang Xian had not performed well. Although he was not at the bottom, he was not outstanding either. Unexpectedly, he was the same as Fang Qingshan. After 3 years of not flying, he soared into the sky. After 3 years of not making a sound, he shocked the world with a single brilliant feat. What a guy. You wouldn't know if you didn't compare yourself to him. His righteous qi was too vast, too pure, and too shocking. Among the spiritual qi in the world, in terms of yang, there was the Buddhist golden light, the Taoist lightning, the sun, and the flame. However, in terms of pure yang, the righteous qi was superior. Zhang Xian hadn't even attacked yet. Just his aura alone was enough to make Shui Yunjian feel like he was an evil man who had committed all sorts of evil, too many to count. He felt a sense of guilt for no reason, as if he had done something wrong and had even met his natural enemy. Although he quickly came to his senses, this wave of aura still caused his expression to change again and again. Kill! Knowing that Zhang Xian was not easy to deal with, and that he might have been pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, Shui Yunjian immediately adjusted his mentality. Even a lion would use its full strength to catch a rabbit. He raised his head to the sky and let out a long roar. The divine court opened wide, and a bright pearl and a flag slowly rose up. Within the pearl, there was limitless true water. It was like the source of all water. There was sunlight water, moonlight water, starlight water, first essence water, Kuei water essence, and so on. Within the banner, there were all sorts of clouds. 3-colored, 5-colored, 7-colored, 9-colored auspicious clouds, tribulation lightning clouds, free white clouds, red killing clouds, bewitching clouds. After that, Shui Yunjian's dermic powers flowed out like floodwaters, flooding into the two treasures. There is a life spring above the heavens. The clouds have no heart, and the water is idle. Why rush to the 10,000 worlds? It's all in the net. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 powerful rays of light shot up into the sky. One was vast and turbulent, rolling over, and the other was boundless and carefree. 2 rays of light, one above and one below, were clouds in the sky and water below. They gathered around the 2 cores. The limitless pearl and the purifying cloud banner were 2 high-grade, level 2 spiritual treasures. What a guy. Although Shui Yunjian didn't have the timeless arc like Fang Qingshan and didn't have any level 3 treasures, he had 2 high-grade level 2 treasures. Moreover, these 2 treasures were complementary spiritual treasures like the sun and moon wheels and the book of Luo River Diagram. When used together with his own cloud water true technique, they were comparable to top-grade level 2 treasures. As expected of the Tao will sect, an existence that could become one of the top 10 inner disciples. He really did have a trump card. If it weren't for the fact that the rewards for the 10 great inner disciple selection were extremely generous and that he had accidentally brought up Zheng Xian, Cloud, and Mist wouldn't have revealed one of his trump cards in the first match. However, this was good as well. There were pros and cons. The cons didn't need to be mentioned. If others knew of his trump card, they would target him, and he wouldn't be able to catch them off guard. The pros were naturally deterrents, making others not dare to underestimate him. If they weren't confident, they wouldn't fight him to the end, lest others take advantage of him. Let's not talk about this for now. As soon as Shui Yunjian realized that Zheng Xian wasn't someone to be trifled with, he went all out. The cloud water true technique activated the limitless pearl, and the purifying cloud banner glowed brightly in the sky. Wave after wave surged, and a sea of clouds floated up and down, interweaving together. The water rose and turned into clouds. The clouds soared and turned into rain. The rain fell and gathered into the sea, and the seawater once again turned into clouds. This cycle repeated itself. Just like the 5 elements, yin and yang, the 8 trigrams, life and death, reincarnation, they formed an organic closed loop, growing and multiplying endlessly. One pearl, one banner, one water, one cloud. The wind boosted the clouds, and the clouds strengthened the water. Before the attacks of the 2 complementary high-grade Level 2 treasures even landed, the aura that Zheng Xian had formed earlier immediately creaked under the pressure, as if it was slowly dissipating. Senior brother Zheng Xian, I wasn't planning to use this set of spiritual treasures so early. It's not too late to admit defeat now. Otherwise, it's hard to say who will win or lose. I don't know why I won't let others take advantage of me. In any case, once we're on the stage, we'll fight whoever comes. Although Zheng Xian was a little surprised by Shui Yunjian's methods, he wasn't worried or afraid. Die. 1,000 cups is too little when drinking with a bosom friend, but half a sentence is too much when the conversation doesn't go well. Since things have reached this point, then they can only fight. Zheng Xian wasn't afraid of others taking advantage of him, but Shui Yunjian wasn't. Heaven and earth turned black and yellow. Universe desolation. Sun and moon waxes and wanes. Stars and mansions open. Winter comes and winter hides. Against Shui Yunjian's attack, Zheng Xian coughed softly. With sincerity, he took out a brush and used his qi as a guide. Using the void as a piece of paper, he began to write down an essay of morality. In the universe desolation, Sangjie created words and Kuinpeng created demonic words. Naturally, it was the same in the universe. However, these words were more original, louder, and more powerful. As a result, great characters could be seen floating in the air, every single one of them shining brilliantly. A type of creation, righteous Tao, and aura of inheritance were released from these characters, suppressing the fate of the great worlds in the heavens. There was great insight, great boldness, and great wisdom that guided the great Tao of literature. The 2 forces clashed together, instantly creating an earth-shattering noise. Everyone's ears were ringing. Crack! On the arena. The space of the originally impregnable arena was torn apart. Huge cracks appeared, stretching across the heavens and earth like a spider web. A terrifying ripple spread out, crushing everything in its path. If it wasn't for the cultivation imparting elder adding a layer of restriction on the arena, the shock waves would have definitely affected the innocent, even if the arena hadn't been destroyed. Luckily, the elder of cultivation techniques foresight worked. The translucent restriction around the battle ring emitted a faint silver light that dissolved all the ripples and prevented them from hurting anyone. Chapter 1448. I didn't expect Senior Zheng Xian to be so powerful. Yeah, it seems like we've all underestimated him. So he's walking the path of accumulation. No wonder we haven't seen him perform in the past few years. It seems like there's another strong opponent in the competition for the top 10 disciples. Seeing the fight between Cloudwater Interval and Zheng Xian, everyone was truly shocked. While Shui Yunjian's methods were somewhat unexpected, it was still acceptable. After all, He was originally the one closest to the top 10 disciples. The one that was truly unimaginable was Zhang Xian. The main reason was that he didn't have much of presence. Just like Fang Qingshan, many of the inner sect disciples probably didn't recognize him. However, Fang Qingshan had only just joined the sect. While he had been through 2 batches, he spent most of his time reading books in the Great Doctrine Palace. Few people knew about him. However, gold always shines. Now that he had exploded, everyone was shocked. In terms of cultivation, while he wasn't the strongest, he was at the late stage of a mortal realm. But in terms of spiritual power and primordial spirit, even Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo couldn't compare to him. This was something that had been honed over time. Furthermore, no one expected Zhang Xian to have a level 2 treasure as well. It was a top-tier level 2 textual treasure, the Qinqiu brush. Just like Shui Yunjian's limitless pearl and purifying cloud banner, when used with his cultivation method, not only could he unleash 100% of their power, he could even unleash 120% of their power. Aside from the Qinqiu brush, it was the same for Zhang Xian. What a pity for Shui Yunjian. Yeah, with his strength, even the last 5 of the original top 10 disciples wouldn't dare to say that they could win against him. I didn't think that he would run into senior Zhang Xian, someone who pretends to be a pig to eat a tiger. This is truly fate. What else can I say? While the crowd was shocked at Zhang Xian's cultivation and combat ability, they also felt sorry for Shui Yunjian. Since he was born, why would he be born? If he hadn't run into Zhang Xian and sent out Fang Qingshan, Peng Bo, Limu Bai, and the others, he might have had a chance of winning. But now, it wasn't that they were looking down on Shui Yunjian. It was just that he wasn't a nobody. As an existence that was second only to the original top 10 inner court disciples, the Dao wills that he cultivated, his cultivation techniques, his divine abilities, and the spirit treasures that he possessed were no secret. Even if they didn't know everything about him, they were at least prepared to deal with him. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious in every battle. This was also the reason why Zhang Xian would always find out who his opponent was before battle. That way, he would be able to better target his opponent. This was especially so when the difference in cultivation was similar. The more he knew, the higher his chances of victory would be. Speaking of which, even if Shui Yunjian had a trump card, how many could he have? Even if he could defeat Zhang Xian after revealing the 2 complementary superior grade 2 spirit treasures, he wouldn't be able to do so. Putting aside how much energy he would consume, whether or not he would be injured, just the exposure of his trump card would not be enough for him to walk to the end. After all, there are still many people who are not easy to deal with. For example, Yin Sha, who was being watched by Fang Qingshan and had yet to make a move. But Zhang Xian was different. As a senior disciple of 2 batches, he was a true newcomer to the crowd. He was even newer than Fang Qingshan. Everyone knew that Fang Qingshan had the timeless Arkansas. As for Zhang Xian, if he had not exposed himself, who would have known that he had the Qinqiu brush? Therefore, everyone was completely unfamiliar with Zhang Xian. They knew nothing about his techniques, spirit treasures, experience, mystiques, habits, and so on. This would greatly increase the difficulty of the challenge. The unknown was the most difficult thing to deal with. Facing an unfamiliar and mysterious opponent, however, added a heavy pressure to him, especially after this unfamiliar opponent had displayed extraordinary strength. It was even more of a headache. As expected, Shui Yunjian was completely at a disadvantage in the following exchange. That was because Zhang Xian had a very good understanding of cloud water. Therefore, his attacks were always targeted. Furthermore, his experience only grew stronger with each passing day. Most importantly, his attack style was similar to that of the Tang Emperor. Even if one wanted to find an opening, it would be very difficult. As for Zhang Xian, Shui Yunjian knew nothing about him. He could only rely on his instincts and experience to fight. When 2 armies faced each other, one side knew everything about the other, while the other side knew very little about the other. Even if their strength was originally about the same, the final result was obvious. There is righteousness in the world, and chaos gives form. Below are rivers and mountains, and above are the sun and stars. People call it righteousness, and it fills the heavens. Zhang Xian looked ordinary, and no one in the crowd would take a second look at him. But at this moment, with righteousness around him, he was like an eternal sun that had descended upon the earth. It was hard to look at him directly. The Qinqiu brush used the brush as a knife to cut down the world. His words were law, and Shui Yunjian could not resist at all. Life is what I desire, and so is what I desire. I cannot have both at the same time. I sacrifice life for righteousness. I am good at cultivating my righteousness. Knowledge comes after knowledge. Sincerity comes after sincerity. Sincerity comes after the heart. Righteousness comes after the body. Righteousness comes after the body. Righteousness comes after the family. Righteousness comes after the country. And righteousness comes after the world. The people are the most important. The country is second. And the ruler is the most important. As Zhang Xian waved his brush, a wave of confusion, Dao, soared into the sky and spread out like a tide, instantly filling the entire arena and turning it into his home field. It suppressed Shui Yunjian to the point where no matter how he resisted, it was futile. Damn it, how could this be? Shui Yunjian had thought that even if he could not make it into the top 3 or even the top 5, he would definitely be able to make it into the top 10. He had been hiding his strength before, or the crowd would not have been so surprised when he took out the Limitless Pearl and Purifying Cloud Banner. Against Wu Duzuan, who was in the top 10, Shui Yunjian had a 50-50 chance of winning even if he did not reveal his trump cards. However, he did not expect that fate would make fools of him. Before he met his old opponent, he would meet Zhang Xian, who had been quiet for 2 years and who had suddenly exploded. Furthermore, he had bumped into him on his own. If I did not choose Zhang Xian, if I did not reveal my trump card at the start, if I admitted defeat straight away, if, for a moment, Shui Yunjian's heart was full of regret. Unfortunately, the truth was right in front of him. Forget it, I admit defeat. Seeing that he was either going to be suppressed by Zhang Xian or forced off the arena, Shui Yunjian could only admit defeat despite his unwillingness. Although he could fight with his life on the line, the outcome was unknown. Even if he won, he would not be able to continue with the following battles. Therefore, he could only admit defeat. Perhaps he still had a chance. Thank you for letting me win. When Zhang Xian heard this, he did not continue his attack and directly stopped. Seeing this, the crowd was not surprised. On the other arenas, there had already been a number theory battle. After all, the difference in strength between those who did not have much hope and the arena masters was too great. Chapter 1449. However, it wasn't as if there weren't any highlights. For example, one of the 2 dark horses that Fang Qingshan was most optimistic about, Yansha. Though this person was a bit unconventional, one had to admit that his killing power was very strong. In terms of purity and density, he might not be as strong as Zhang Xian, but in terms of sharpness and unpredictability, he was superior. In particular, he also had an upper second rank killing sword in his hand. It was comparable to many top second rank treasures. It was unknown if this item was formed from the bones of some ferocious beast, or perhaps it was formed from the bloody aura of an ancient battlefield, or for some other reason, but it was as pale as snow. It was shaped like a willow leaf, and its attacks were as fast as lightning. It moved like a ghost, and the sword was engraved with strange and dense seal scripts. At first glance, it looked like a half-closed eye, eerie and frightening. Against his attacks, one had to either be calm and have unparalleled defense, or fight speed with speed to gain the upper hand and not let him attack. Otherwise, once one fell into his rhythm, even if one's cultivation level was higher than his, one would still be at a disadvantage and lose. He was like an assassin, a veteran of the battlefield, a natural-born killer. The river Styx and Azura paled in comparison. This wasn't just because of cultivation level, but also because of their origin. Stabbing with the sword, fast, accurate, and ruthless. There was nothing it could not overcome, only speed could not overcome. His entire being seemed to have become one with the sword light. Even space couldn't stop him. There was no one in the world that he couldn't kill. Yin Sha seemed to have been born to kill, and he was the only one who had cultivated the Tao of killing. That made him even more powerful than before. Back then, the last disciple of the 10 great inner disciples didn't know him very well, so he only exchanged 10 moves with him before he was stabbed in the middle of his eyebrows. If it wasn't for the arena, if it wasn't for the fact that Yin Sha didn't want to kill, this sword would have taken his life. Though this battle was short, it was shocking. It was even more eye-catching than Zhang Xian's battle. After all, Yin Sha's opponent was ranked 10th, which was above Shui Yunjian. Sadly, no one knew if he didn't live up to his reputation or if Yin Sha was just too powerful. In any case, he did not display the strength of the top 10. This made the crowd sigh. However, anyone with a discerning eye would know that his defeat was due to his underestimation of his opponent, his lack of understanding of his opponent, and Yin Sha's strength. Apart from Yin Sha, Fang Qingshan had also witnessed the cultivation and battle prowess of the top 5 intersect disciples apart from Pang Bo. Among them, the second was Jiang Shan. The third place was Li Mubai. The fourth place was Shang Wanjin. Fifth place was Qin Shirue. Among them, Li Mubai and Shang Wanjin were defending, while Jiang Shan and Qin Shirue were attacking later. Li Mubai was the most elegant person among them. He stood tall like a jade tree, and his smile was like a bright star. He was a handsome man who could charm thousands of girls, and he was surrounded by all kinds of halos. These halos did not refer to talent, background, cultivation, appearance, etc. Instead, they were actual halos. It was just like the thousands of auspicious clouds released by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the desolation. These halos were like mystiques and spirit treasures. They seemed to be somewhere in between, and their power was unparalleled. They could increase one's battle prowess, weaken one's opponent's battle prowess, attack, and defense. He was simply a jack of all trades. However, it might also be precisely because he was a jack of all trades that he was proficient in. As a result, his offense, defense, and other aspects were not particularly outstanding. As a result, he was suppressed by Pang Bo and Jiang Shan. However, it was also possible that Li Mubai was concealing his strength. After all, even Shui Yunjian and the others had great treasures on them. No one believed that he did not have any. However, he did not use them. Moreover, no matter what kind of opponent he encountered, he appeared to be so calm and collected. Clearly, he had not revealed his true strength, and it was unknown how much he had revealed. Shang Wanjin was similar to Li Mubai. He was quite good-looking. His face was like jade, his eyes were like stars, his hair was like a knife, his eyebrows were like ink, and his nose was like a hanging gourd. He was gentle and refined. However, his mystique was similar to that of a summoning sorcerer. There was a stack of cards in his hand, which contained all kinds of mystiques, treasures, and even living creatures that were sealed. Moreover, compared to Li Mubai's halo, his card had a big advantage, which was that he didn't need to consume his own spiritual power, just like using a talisman. However, talismans were generally a one-time thing, but the card could be used repeatedly, and it could also be promoted along with his cultivation. However, there should be some drawbacks. It was just that he did not force himself to his limits, so he did not reveal it. Otherwise, he would not have been suppressed by Li Mubai. As for Jiang Shan and Qin Shirue, they were not bad either. Jiang Shan was from the same family as Jiang Overlord and Jiang Mingwei. The Jiang family was indeed the #1 family in the Dao sect. There were countless outstanding disciples in the sect. Among the true disciples were Jiang Overlord and the others. In the inner sect, there were also Jiang Shan, Jiang Qingwei, and the rising Jiang Mingwei and the others. He had a majestic body and a dignified appearance. His eyes were like cold stars, and his 2 curved eyebrows were like paint. His chest was broad, and he had an imposing aura that could not be defeated by 10,000 men. There was nothing fancy between his punches and kicks, but his aura was majestic. He was like a dragon and a tiger. His fists could split the 4 seas. His feet could kick everywhere, and he could destroy mountains and rivers. Unfortunately, he was born at the wrong time. He met Pang Bo, who was similar in terms of aura, magic power, laws, and Tao will, but he was slightly better. He was even more miserable than Shui Yunjian. Since he was born, how could he be born? As for Qin Shuriwei, she was a little weaker than the other three. However, compared to Shui Yunjian, Bu Yinran and the others were still able to suppress them. Therefore, it did not take long for the top 10 arenas to be decided. Both Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo were stubborn and unshakable. At the same time, they represented the Dark Horse and the original top 10 disciples. Besides them, the original top 10 disciples were only Jiang Shan, Li Mubai, Shang Wanjin, and Qin Shuriwei. As for the other four, they were Zheng Xian, Yin Sha, Emperor Lu, and Di. As for the others, whether it was Wu Duzuan, Bu Yinran, Ling Bo, or the Dark Horse Wu Fa, Nie Yun, and the others, they were all eliminated. As for Jiayu, Feng Long, Shui Yunjian, and the others who were bent on revenge, none of them achieved their goals. Among them, Jiayu and Feng Long fare better. In the end, Wu Duzuan and Ling Bo did not make it to the top 10. The only tragic one was Shui Yunjian. However, even if he did not meet Zheng Xian in the first round, which of the remaining 9 would be easy to deal with? However, humans always like to find excuses for themselves. Putting all this aside, after the top 10 disciples were decided, the real exciting part came next. This was because the ranking of the top 10 disciples was next. Chapter 1450. I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect this. Yeah, I thought Fang Qingshan would be amazing enough, but I didn't expect there to be Zheng Xian, Yin Sha, and the others. Yeah, half of the original 10 inner disciples have been replaced. This is unimaginable in the past. Especially Zheng Xian's outburst. It was really unexpected. I used to think he was stubborn and inflexible, but now I know he's confident. Looking at the new top 10 inner disciples who were decided on the arena, the surrounding onlookers started to discuss. To sum it up, they were surprised. Although they knew there were more dark horses in this year's competition, the original 10 inner disciples were not easy to deal with either. To be able to stay on the list for so many years, they definitely deserved their reputation. However, the result was out of everyone's expectations. Half of the top 10 inner disciples were replaced. And if it wasn't for Qin Shuyue's good luck, she might not have been able to maintain her current position. Indeed, it was not easy to go through 10 rounds of continuous battles. Bu Yinran, Ling Bo, Wu Duzuan, Wu Fa, and the others all entered the top 10, but were all replaced in the end. In this arena tournament, unless one had the strength that Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo had, it would still be up to luck to make it to the end. Even if it was Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo, there were people who challenged them in the later rounds. Of course, they didn't want to take advantage of the situation. They just wanted to test the strength of these two famous experts and, at the same time, test the strength of others. Unfortunately, Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo were not people they could test. In the face of other people's challenges, Fang Qingshan did nothing. He took a step forward and stood on a chessboard, allowing them to attack him. They couldn't even touch the corner of his clothes. As for Pang Bo, he was even more straightforward than Fang Qingshan. Other than a limited number of people, most people couldn't even take one punch from him. Of course, this was because Nie Yun, Ling Bo, and the others already knew his strength, so they didn't challenge him. Otherwise, they might have let him throw a few more punches. However, the surprise was only temporary. What came next was excitement. After all, compared to the previous top 10 disciples, which was just an appetizer, the next top 10 disciples' ranking competition was the real main dish. After all, in order to be the first to enter the top 10 disciples, the strong generally avoided fighting with the strong. This was also why no one challenged Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo in the beginning, because the loss outweighed the gain. They already knew that the two of them were difficult to deal with, and that their chances of winning were very low. Even if they went up, they would only be defeated. Even if it was a battle of attrition, the one who would benefit would not be themselves, but only the last person. So, who would take the risk? However, what happened next was different. Because he had already been selected as one of the top 10 inner disciples, becoming a successor disciple was already a done deal. The benefits were already in his hands, and now it was time to see how many benefits there were. Moreover, as a powerhouse, he naturally wanted to challenge even stronger opponents. Resources were hard to come by, teachers were hard to come by, and opponents were similarly hard to come by. Therefore, now they would truly give it their all. Therefore, the excitement had just begun. Dang! A bell was rung, and Elder Zhuge Jin walked out. He looked at Fang Qingshan's 10 people in satisfaction, nodded, and said warmly, "The top 10 inner disciples have been decided. Now we will begin the last segment, the top 10 disciples ranking competition. For the sake of fairness, it will be the same as before. Free challenges. The winner takes all. Those who win more battles will be ranked higher. If the two of them have the same number of victories, they will fight each other." Although it was called a free challenge, it was a little different from the previous battles. Before this, Qin Shan and Pang Bo could still rely on their reputation and the fact that others were afraid of them. Now, they shouldn't even think about that. After all, they dared to drag the emperor down from his high horse. They were everyone's goal. While ensuring their own benefits, challenging them was everyone's wish. Even if others didn't challenge them, if they didn't have a good battle record, even if they ended up first or second, they wouldn't be able to convince the masses. Plus, there was the winner takes all. The more battles they won, the higher their rank would be. If they didn't fight, how could they win? Putting that aside, as soon as Zhuge Jin finished speaking, someone walked out. However, it could be seen that this person was a little mischievous. There was a faint smile on his face, and his two thick eyebrows were also gently rippling. It was as if he always had a mischievous feeling. His shoulder-length hair fluttered in the wind, and there was a trace of unruliness about him. "I am Qin Shirui. I would like to challenge junior brother Fang Qingshan." That's right. The first person to come out was Qin Shirui. Moreover, he challenged Fang Qingshan right away. The show was about to start. Seeing this scene, the crowd instantly felt refreshed. It was as if they had drunk a cup of refreshing coffee when they were tired. Hearing this, Fang Qingshan raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect that someone would challenge him as soon as the ranking competition started. That's what I want. Please. However, he would have to experience this sooner or later anyway. Therefore, Fang Qingshan shrugged and nodded nonchalantly. Buzz! In the next moment, Zhuge Jin summoned another arena soundlessly. Compared to the Great Path Arena that Fang Qingshan had seen before, this level 3 Cardinal Treasure was even better. This was actually something that Zhuge Jin had considered. Previously, when Zheng Xian and Shui Yunjian fought, the arena's defense had almost been broken. Naturally, the fight between Fang Qingshan and the others was even more intense. As a precaution, they summoned an even more sturdy arena. This arena would not be a problem for them, even if they had broken through to the deity emperor realm. Please, please. With a tap of their feet, the two of them instantly arrived on the arena. Rumble. Their eyes met. Sparks flew in all directions as they seemed to have solidified in midair. All right, I've been waiting for the stars and the moon. Finally, this moment has arrived. Yes, it's finally going to be a fight. And it's going to be a fight with Fang Qingshan right away. I'm so excited. Don't you think it's a little strange? Why did Qin Shirui challenge Fang Qingshan right away? What's so strange about it? Regardless of whether he challenges him or not, they will fight anyway. When the spectating disciples saw such an intense scene at the start of the ranking competition, with sparks flying everywhere, they were all excited as if they had been injected with stimulants. 2 rounds of the inner disciple competition had begun. The first round was the Crimson Heaven Domain trial. They could only judge the situation through the star catalog. Although the second round was right under their noses, to ensure that they would be in the top 10, to reduce unnecessary losses, everyone avoided a fight between strong opponents. Although the emergence of a few dark horses made everyone very surprised, in the end, it was not enough to satisfy them. Now, the excitement had finally begun. Chapter 1451. Dying. In the arena, Qin Shuriwei chose to make the first move. He knew that although he was one of the top 10 intersect disciples and was at the mid-stage of mortal realm, there was still a big gap between him and Fang Qingshan. Just like the gap between him and Pang Bo, there was still a big gap between him and Fang Qingshan. Therefore, he didn't care about modesty anymore. Furthermore, the reason why he was the first to come out and challenge Fang Qingshan was not because he had chosen his opponent randomly. He was the first to challenge because entering the top 10 intersect disciples was already his limit. He would be lucky if he didn't end up at the bottom, let alone in the top 5. As for challenging Fang Qingshan, it wasn't because he was giving up or arrogant. It was because he was a pioneer. Yes, this time, the reason why Qin Shuriwei challenged Fang Qingshan was to test his strength so that Pang Bo and the others could use him as a reference. In the end, Fang Qingshan was like the other dark horses. He had only entered the sect for a short time and hadn't fought much. Therefore, everyone didn't know much about his methods. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will always be victorious. The first step was to understand the other party better. The reason for this was because of the conflict of interests between factions. Yes, factions and interests. Although Fang Qingshan was valued by the higher-ups, he was still a newcomer who had just joined the Dao sect. Even if he was recommended by the Jiang family, it was just a recommendation. He wasn't a member of the Jiang family. At the same time, Qin Shuriwei represented the interests of the top 10 intersect disciples, while Fang Qingshan had become a synonym for the new dark horse. Therefore, Qin Shuriwei was the first to challenge Fang Qingshan. Qin Shuriwei activated his magic power, and Dao will surged. Majestic Dao will shot up into the sky, and all kinds of sounds resounded in all directions. Fine and dense seal scripts leaped into the air like fist-sized pearls. They were like precious lotus lamps that filled the sky, shining brightly and illuminating all directions. In the next moment, a new moon rose into the sky, pure and clear. Following that, a formless mighty force poured down, blossoming with boundless divine light. That light was actually the boundless power of the moon, continuously spreading in all directions. The power of Yin and the power of moon. Fang Qingshan's slanted brows raised when he saw this. Yet his body didn't move as he stretched out his hand to remove a bracelet from his wrist, and then he tossed it into the air. In an instant, the bracelet grew with the wind, and it transformed into the size of an acre. Dense Dao markings interweaved on it like dragon scales, and the energy of the 5 elements of samsara rose without end. The inside of the bracelet seemed to be connected to endless time and space, an endless abyss. It was like a black hole, and within it was a giant beast that could swallow everything in the world. Freeze! Fang Qingshan was unruffled. He pointed into the distance, and the reincarnation ring trembled, giving off a profound aura. A wisp of aura directly caused the surrounding space to freeze. Swallow. In the next moment, an unprecedented, devouring force erupted from the deep and boundless samsara circle. The power of the moon and moon was directly absorbed by the samsara circle and swept into the black hole on the spot. No matter how many new moons splashed out, they were all swallowed by the samsara circle without any resistance. They sank into the deepest part and were digested. Seeing that Fang Qingshan dealt with it so easily, Qin Shuriwei was not at all surprised. If Fang Qingshan had really been killed by his attack, his first reaction would probably not have been joy, but horror. He would not have been thinking about how he had defeated Fang Qingshan, but what exactly was going on. Therefore, Qin Shuriwei, who was unperturbed, continued to attack. However, the new moon above his head became blurry. In the next moment, it split into 2, and 2 new moons appeared in the sky. With the addition of a new moon, the power of the moon and moon naturally multiplied. In an instant, as the second moon appeared, the original bright moon illuminating the great river seemed to have become a bright moon above the sea. The surging power of the moon was like the tidal force in the sea. Not only was it more turbulent, but it was also deeper and more frightening. Unfortunately, although the power of the moon was more refined, a chill that could freeze the heavens and earth swept across the entire area. But to the reincarnation ring, it was still not very useful. One man held the pass, and no one could move it. Light flowed, and as the rune Taoist rhymes flashed, it continuously emitted a devouring power, sweeping the power of the moon and moon that was full of destructive power into it. It was suppressed within the ring, unable to do anything. In an instant, an incomparably frightening scene appeared between heaven and earth. The power of the moon and moon, which was condensed and like ice and frost, turned into a vast torrent that cleansed the heavens and earth, bringing with it ice and destruction. It was not as clear as before. A wheel and a black hole suppressed the surroundings, devouring everything. No matter how domineering the power of the moon was, it could not do anything in front of this reincarnation ring. It kept sweeping into the ring and suppressing everything. Was Qin Shi strong? The answer was yes. As one of the top 10 inner sect disciples, he was ranked 5th. How could he be someone with an undeserved reputation? It was also certain that the power of the moon was not strong. The true fire of the sun was domineering and unparalleled. There was nothing it could not burn. As the equally famous power of the moon, how could it be simple? Unfortunately, as the devil grew 1 foot, the Tao grew 10 feet. Who asked him to meet Fang Qingshan and his natural mystical power, the reincarnation ring? However, since Qin Shi dared to challenge Fang Qingshan first, he naturally had a trump card. Seeing that the 2 crescent moons could not even shake Fang Qingshan's mystical power, there was no way it could hurt Fang Qingshan. Qin Shiyue's eyes instantly narrowed into a line. He did not say anything, but his dermic powers surged out like a flood. Then, a shocking scene appeared. Not long after, the 3rd moon appeared. Following that, it was the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. The 7th round. What a guy. This did not seem to be the moon of the moon. Instead, it was like bamboo shoots after the rain, appearing one after another. At a glance, there were new moons, crescent moons, crescent moons, crescent moons, full moons, crescent moons, crescent moons. From the tip of a small lotus flower to a full moon, it kept changing. After a careful count, there were exactly 15 moons. As the saying went, too much was as bad as not enough. When a moon was full, it would weaken. Extreme hardness would give birth to softness. Extreme yang would give birth to yin. Thinking back to the scene of 10 moons in the sky during the desolation, one could imagine the power of this mystical power that Qin Shi was using now. If 10 moons in the sky was boundless heat that could burn the heavens and boil the oceans, there was nothing it could not burn. At this moment, the bright moon in the sky was boundless cold, freezing the heavens and earth and freezing time and space. Looks like Qin Shi is using his trump card. Yes, and compared to before, it has improved qualitatively. Now, let's see how Fang Qingshan deals with it. Hopefully, he can force out more of his trump cards. Looking at Qin Shi's mystic skill, everyone's spirits were shaken. This could be considered as Qin Shi's signature mystic skill. Furthermore, compared to the past, it could be considered as a performance that surpassed his usual standards. Now, it was time to see how Fang Qingshan would deal with it. At this moment, everyone turned their gazes towards Fang Qingshan. Chapter 1452. Not bad, not bad. Seeing Qin Shi's move, Fang Qingshan nodded in admiration. Although the power of the sun and the power of yin could not compare to the reincarnation and creation arts, they were still high-end laws that were second only to them. Although they belonged to yin and yang, they were not inferior to yin and yang at all. Although Fang Qingshan had not cultivated the power of yin, he had obtained a treasure of the moon when he had cultivated the power of the 5 elements. It was not the menstrual wheel, but the moon cassia tree, one of the 10 great connate spirit roots of desolation. Now, this spirit root was still growing in the spirit root unit world in the timeless Arkansas. Although it had not turned into a chaotic spirit root and was comparable to the hollow willow tree, it was only a step away. However, even the origin power of the moon cassia tree was world apart from it. The only flaw was that the power of Een was somewhat scattered. If it could be gathered together, the destructive power of this vast power would be even more powerful. Just like when the 10 golden crows had caused the desolation, they had been born with the will of the heavens. They had a heaven-given formation diagram, the 10-day heaven refining formation, which could increase the limits of their combat power by 1 level. It would not be a problem for them to fight above their level. If Qin Shuriwe could also find a formation to complement it, with these new moons as the foundation and central control, the destructive power would increase to the limit. However, even now, it was enough to attract Fang Qingshan's attention. At least, the reincarnation circle alone could not completely suppress the moon essence. Go! But Fang Qingshan wiped his forehead, and the heavenly gate opened. The heavenly court shone brightly, and clouds rose. The 3 flowers and 5 qi merged into one, and a treasure map flew out. It grew with the wind, and in an instant, it covered the sky and the earth. But one could see 2 wheels in it, like heaven and earth. One was above, and the other was below. Between them, there were endless laws of the way appearing and disappearing, evolving into flowers, trees, mountains, and rivers. Time passed, and the void flowed. Those who did not know would think that it was a complete and real world. This item was none other than Fang Qingshan's other natural divine ability, the 5-element cycle diagram. The 5 elements formation hovered in the air and instantly expanded outwards at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it had enveloped the entire arena. If it weren't for the restriction on the stage itself, the array diagram would have continued to expand and even encompass the entire stage. Following that, the entire formation naturally fused with the stage, and with a flash, it disappeared into thin air. At the same time, Qin Shuriwe, his bright moon in the sky, and the vast power of Een also disappeared. When they saw that, the other inner disciples who had just been selected frowned. This luminous moon in the sky was Qin Shuriwe's special ability, but it was broken just like that. Their hearts sank to the bottom of the valley. Looks like Qin Shuriwe isn't Fang Qingshan's match. Isn't that obvious? If he doesn't have any other tricks up his sleeves, I'm afraid it's only a matter of time before he loses. But to be able to force Fang Qingshan to use 2 of his natural divine abilities is already not bad. Yes, these 2 natural divine abilities are not simple. The first circle seemed to contain everything, but this array diagram seems to be a natural divine ability, but not a natural divine ability. It seems to be a spiritual treasure, but not a spiritual treasure. It can suppress the void, and is not weaker than an ordinary spiritual treasure of the 2nd level. Putting aside the discussions of the others, Qin Shuriwe suddenly felt dizzy after Fang Qingshan used the 5-element cycle diagram. Although he quickly recovered, his body tensed up and his shoulders sank. It was as if he was carrying the blue sky on his back, and even breathing became difficult. Qin Shuriwe's expression changed. He knew that he had fallen into the opponent's array. As far as the eye could see, in the space of the array, it was as if the opening of the sky had failed. The 2 wheels that represented the sky and the earth were slowly approaching each other. The surrounding space seemed to be compressed and began to solidify. It was as clear as crystal, and it seemed to be in between reality and illusion. Countless ancient silver patterns appeared. Heaven and earth merged and returned to chaos. The entire space of the array began to collapse from the middle, and it constantly shrank inwards. The space was shrinking rapidly. At the same time, because the space could not withstand the pressure, it first solidified, then crystallized. In the end, it could no longer withstand the pressure, and cracks began to appear. Then, it continuously collapsed and was crushed into powder. It turned into nothingness. It was a terrifying scene of great destruction. Anything within this space would be crushed into powder. No living creature could even dream of surviving. Junior brother, if you have no other tricks up your sleeve, just admit defeat. After the space shrank to a certain extent, it suddenly stopped. Then, Fang Qingshan's voice sounded. This was a challenge tournament, after all, not a battle of life and death. As the saying goes, leave a way out. Therefore, after Fang Qingshan forced Qin Shiriyue into an awkward position, he did not strike the iron while it was hot and continued to attack. Instead, he stopped to negotiate. Of course, this was also because the gap between him and Qin Shiriyue was too big. He was confident that he could suppress him at any time. Otherwise, he still understood the principle of a lion using its full strength to hunt a rabbit. Plus, even though he stopped, it did not mean that Fang Qingshan let his guard down. What a powerful technique. It truly is impressive. His reputation is not without reason. I have used everything I have, but Fang Qingshan only used 2 techniques to defeat me. As Qin Shiriyue lamented, he felt the crushing power of imprisonment that came from the heavens and earth. The bright moon above his head was about to be forcefully compressed back into his body. His magic power was stagnant and could barely circulate anymore. From this, one could tell how terrifying this pressure was. Qin Shiriyue tried to use the power of space to see if he could break free from the restraints and even escape from the array. However, it was all in vain. Because his understanding of space was not as strong as Fang Qingshan's, it was impossible for him to use the power of space to break free from the Tao of space. Plus, even if he could use the power of space to leave this space, it would not be a good idea. After all, he would have to face the turbulent flow of space. Once he gets lost in it, it would be troublesome to escape. Therefore, all that was left was to use brute force. Break! Qin Shiriyue touched the center of his brow. Instantly, a third eye appeared, just like when Zhong and Erling shone. In the next moment, a ray of light shot out like moonlight and collided with the barrier of space. However, it was still useless. The ray of light was sharp and seemed to have the ability to break through restrictions. But the moment it left the eye and appeared in space, it was suppressed by the power of the 5 elements reincarnation diagram by 50%. Then, it was trapped on the spot by the power of confinement and then killed. Looks like Senior Brother Qin still has some tricks up his sleeve. Since that is the case, let's fight again. Seeing that Qin Shiriyue did not accept his kindness, Fang Qingshan did not mind. With a thought, the space that had just stopped shrank once again. Chapter 1453. Fang Qingshan had already thrown out an olive branch, but Qin Shiriyue did not accept it. Instead, he was still testing the waters. Fang Qingshan knew that Qin Shiriyue would not give up just like that. Since he was not at the end of the line, there was no need for him to hold back. With a single thought from Fang Qingshan, the world that had come to a stop and seemed to have stabilized began to tremble once again. The speed at which the 2 roulette wheels intersected seemed to be increasing, and the space continued to shrink. Waves of formless pressure locked down every inch of space. The more space shrank, the harder it was to move. Waves of pressure surged into Xiao Qin's body like a surging tide. If he did not think of a way, once the heaven and earth merged into one, even if he had a trump card, he would not be able to use it. Explode! Qin Shiriyue let out a furious roar. The bright moon, which was about to be pushed back into the Naiwan Palace by the pressure of the heavens and the earth, suddenly seemed to have received an endless amount of strength. The golden monkey swung his cudgel, and the jade space was clear and boundless. The different forms of the bright moon immediately merged into one, turning into a complete lunar star. Then it exploded in the void, turning into endless power of the lunar star, crazily rushing in all directions. In the moonlight, there was a sharp freezing power, extreme een power, and even the power of time and space. Each of them contained the power to shatter the vacuum. Interesting. Seeing this, Fang Qingshan's eyes lit up. He did not expect Qin Shiriyue's theurgy to have such a change. No wonder he did not admit defeat. Previously, he was still saying that if he could unify all the lunar stars and use them as the base of the formation, then set up a formation similar to the 10 days heaven refining formation, the power of this theurgy would not be completely different, but it would at least increase by more than 10 times. At this moment, the multiple lunar stars merged into one, and the power was unified. Although it was not as strong as the 10 days heaven refining formation, using the smallest amount of power to leverage the greatest power, it was still not bad. The power of the entire theurgy had at least doubled. Especially at the end, when the lunar stars exploded, this method, which was similar to dragging someone down with him after death, doubled the power of the theurgy again. However, even so, it was still a little short of the 5 elements reincarnation diagram. This divine ability was different from the reincarnation ring and reincarnation all. It wasn't a direct evolution of the 5 elements to form reincarnation, but a combination of the 5 elements reincarnation. The 5 elements were the foundation of heaven and earth, and reincarnation contained time and space. The stability of a formation constructed from these 2 laws was almost identical to that of a true primal chaos world. An expert at the immortal realm couldn't destroy this world easily. Take Pangu's primal chaos world, for example. Although Pangu hadn't broken through to the next level, his battle prowess had long since reached that level. He also had all sorts of rank 3 treasures, but in the end, he still hadn't broken through to the next level. As a result, the current situation was like this. The destructive power of the shadow rampaged through the world, colliding with the power of space in the middle of the 2 wheels. There was a deafening rumble, and it even pushed the 2 wheels of the reincarnation of 5 elements far away. The space in the middle was destroyed. The barrier of the world, which was the reincarnation diagram of 5 elements, seemed to have become cracked porcelain. Hideous cracks appeared and creaked, unable to bear the burden. However, it couldn't break the barrier, which gave the reincarnation diagram a chance to catch its breath. The 5 elements multiplied unceasingly. Space and time crisscrossed, and life and death changed. One side was destroyed, and the other side was repaired. Thus, the final result was a failure on the verge of success. How about it? Senior brother Qin, you still don't want to admit defeat? But he couldn't do it twice, and he couldn't do it thrice. Fang Qingshan had compromised a lot. If Qin Shuriyue still didn't know what was good for him, he couldn't blame him. Wah! Qin Shuriyue spat out a mouthful of blood. His body swayed as if he was about to fall. Although his previous attack wasn't like what Fang Qingshan had guessed, where he wanted to drag his opponent down with him after he died, it was still a heavy burden on his body. Hurting his opponent would hurt him as well. Hearing Fang Qingshan's voice, Qin Shuriyue knew that if he didn't admit defeat and continued to pester Fang Qingshan, he wouldn't show mercy to him. Just like what Fang Qingshan had said, if he didn't have a trump card, surrendering was the most dignified and the best way. As for his goal, though he didn't achieve it, he had achieved it. However, did he have a trump card? The answer was yes. Therefore, though he accepted Fang Qingshan's kindness, he wasn't going to give up. At least before he unleashed his trump card, he wasn't going to give up. Even if he couldn't defeat Fang Qingshan, it would be good for him to expose more of his techniques and waste more of his qi. Wasn't that why he challenged Fang Qingshan in the first place? Thank you, junior brother Fang. However, I have one more move. If this one doesn't work, then I will admit defeat. Oh, I hope you won't disappoint me. If that's the case, then make your move. Fang Qingshan didn't expect Qin Shuriyue to still have a trump card at this stage. He was shocked at first, then he became even more interested. He wanted to see what trump card he had that made him so confident. Actually, after thinking about it carefully, it wasn't surprising. At least, Qin Shuriyue had only used his remarkable powers and hadn't used any spiritual treasures. Moreover, he was ranked 5th among the inner sect's top 10 disciples. Moreover, he was a direct descendant of the powerful Qin family in the Taoist sect. How could he not have a spiritual treasure to protect himself? So, Fang Qingshan was filled with a trace of anticipation towards Qin Shuriyue's words of deciding the outcome with a single move. I won't disappoint you, Qin Shuriyue replied confidently. Gather, as he shouted coldly. His long hair started to move even though there was no wind. It fluttered recklessly and emitted an imposing aura. Whoosh! Following that, the power of Een that had exploded earlier was like 100 rivers returning to the sea, like birds returning to the forest. In the next moment, a dazzling and cold full moon appeared above Qin Shiyue's head once again. Traces of cold air were naturally emitted from it. The surrounding temperature suddenly froze. It wasn't just the temperature. Time and space also seemed to stop flowing at this moment. This was not the end. At some point in time, an almost undetectable trace of red began to appear on the pure and clear moon. Moreover, this smear of red spread out at lightning speed. In an instant, the entire moon was dyed blood red. The originally cold and cold moon had now become mysterious, strange, and evil. Then, stars started to twinkle around the blood moon. These stars were the same as the blood moon. They were all red. A nauseating smell of blood filled the sky. At this moment, it didn't seem like the mysterious, vast, and intoxicating starry sky. Instead, it seemed like the source of evil. He subconsciously wondered if he was also guilty of evil. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.